الرجيم بسم الله.
Dr. Sachs, please just send a message on the chat since we have you on a different name. This way we can make you an admin and get you going. I see. Awesome. Hello.
You see him on chat, Hassan?
I saw him on the camera.
Oh, okay, awesome. I'm good.
So everyone else can turn off their cameras. That's fine. No problem. Just leave it to the admin teams. Awesome. Again, thank you everybody for joining. Dr. Sachs, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself. Sorry.
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. We can see the slides perfectly. So
Good.
We'll start with Dalia's presentation and then we'll go from there.
Very good.
So in 1 more minute, inshallah.
Dr. Sachs, there is a question beforehand. Just wanted to make sure that we can. The question was, will we get the copy of the slides or should we be writing everything down? I think it's a.
Well, of course, you, Hassan, you are welcome to record this presentation and share it with anyone who wants to see it. The handout, which is 16 pages, has all the main points of the presentation, as well as all the links to all the research.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And yes, this is recorded and we are about to stream it live on YouTube as well. So we're getting that logistics together. Yes.
Hassan, when you're ready, let me know. And Dr. Sachs, welcome.
Thank you.
Give me 1 minute. You can go ahead, Dalia.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our workshop, Dr. Sachs's workshop on evidence-based parenting. We are so glad to have all of you here with us today. We want to thank each and every one of you, and we want to start also by thanking Dr. Sachs for being here with us.
Thank you.
This workshop was only possible with Allah's mercy and blessings. And after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the community owes Masjid champions so much thank you to the Associate Director, Brother Nader al-Tayyib, to Brother Riza Bakos, and our Brother Hassan Masoud is the one helping with the emceeing today. We want to thank them for making this possible, and actually want to thank Muslim Youth Health, specifically Sister Bueni. She, Brother Hassan reached out to all of us. They contacted the active members in society, in our community, and alhamdulillah, tabarakallah, this is where we all are today. I would like to name a few of the amazing sisters and brothers that they got this to happen with Allah's blessings. I want to start by Sister Bueni. She's the one who reached out to most of us, and she's the one, to all of us really, and she's the one who reached out to Brother Hassan in Champions Masjid. I want to thank Sister Zulaikha, Sister Khadija, Sister Tammy, Sister Tawakkaltu, Sister Farzana, Brother Kabir, Sister Farah, and so many others that I feel that if I start counting names, I'm just going to miss somebody. So at this point, I think I'm just going to be talking about the amazing institutions that were a part of this, that have actually put us in the front line so that we represent those amazing institutions. I want to start with Nisa Hope Center, Clear Lake Masjid, Masjid Hamza, Everest Academy, Masjid Al-Aqsa, Al-Rahma Islamic Institute, Iman Academy, Masjid Al-Mu'mineen, Masjid Al-Tawheed, Brand Lane Masjid or Masjid Al-Sabirin, Masjid Al-Ihsan, Islam in Spanish, Houston Quran Academy, and last but by no means least, my own masjid, Maryam Masjid. We have always heard the proverb that it takes a village to raise a kid. So our community is getting together to hold these workshops, and we plan to continue this community effort with Allah's will, inshallah, in the future. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us that إذا مات الإنسان انقطع عنه عمله إلا من ثلاث. To continue this جارية أو علم ينتفع Allah's will, ولد صالح inshallah, in the future. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the messenger of Allah, told us said when the son of Adam dies, his deeds are discontinued with three exceptions. Society whose benefit is continuous, and knowledge from which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the messenger or a righteous said when the son of Adam dies, his deeds are discontinued. So what three exceptions? How can we raise kids whose benefit is to become this amazing thing in our lives? Many people to become that pleasure, that child, pure pleasure for this world, and the pleasure in the hereafter. So what should we do now? And this is where how can we raise kids to become this amazing thing in our lives? He's a family to become that pleasure, that pure pleasure for us in this world, and the pleasure in the hereafter. And he has a PhD in psychology. And this is where Dr. Lear will talk to us, inshallah, amazing lecture about some of the most toxic aspects. He's a doctor, a psychologist, and an author. What we as parents and MD medical need to do to protect our children from anxiety and psychology and alienation. He will talk to us. Dr. Sachs earned his bachelor's degree about some of the most toxic aspects. He earned both his PhD in psychology and MD in family practice. He practiced for a number of years until he decided to go ahead and start talking to the community. Dr. Sachs earned his bachelor's degree in biology. He started talking all across North America, from California to Nova Scotia to Alaska, Florida, for a number of years until he decided to go ahead, England, Germany, Italy, Mexico, so that Scotland is general. And he started talking all across North America, from California to Nova Scotia to Alaska, Florida, years. And we are so humbled that Australia to share that experience with us today. Italy, Mexico, he has written 4 books for parents. And the books is Why Gender Amazing that he went another 160 communities in the past 19 years. His girls we are on so the humbled that he's coming to share that experience with us today. He has written 4 books for parents. One of the books
at this
Why
point,
Gender
I would like
Matters.
to ask you all
Another
to
is
just
Boys
write your
Adrift.
questions on a piece of
The
paper,
third
so that
is
we
Girls
can
on the
actually,
Edge.
and the
We can
fourth
actually
is
refer
the
to these
collapse
because
of parenting.
sometimes whatever questions you have,
Dr.
So,
Sachs will
at this
actually
point,
answer
I would
in
like
his,
to ask
in his
all
talk.
to just
So
write
if you
your
put
questions
all
on
those
a
questions on a piece of paper for
so
yourself,
that we can
and
actually
then you wait to see if he answers them
we
or
can
not.
actually refer
And if
to
he
these
does not
because
answer them, then
sometimes
please
whatever
post them
questions
on
you
the
have,
link. Dr.
the brother
Sachs will
Hassan and
actually
Sister
answer
Boyni
in
will
his
post after the
in his
first
talk.
break for the
So if you put all those questions on a piece of
Saleh,
paper for yourself,
which is the
and then
sunset
you wait to see if he
for,
answers them or
for
not.
us. So we are
And
going to
if he
be
does not answer
inshallah
them, then
proceeding
please
from now until
post them on the
5:30.
link.
At
The brother
5:30,
Hassan and Sister
inshallah, God
Boyni will
willing,
post after the
we will
first
have
break
50
for
minutes
the
break,
Maghrib,
then we
for
will
Maghrib,
proceed
inshallah,
again.
Maghrib Saleh.
And
Which is the
will proceed
sunset
up to
Saleh
from
for
5:45
us. So
we are going to be
6:45,
inshallah
and then we'll
proceeding
have a
from now
5-minute
until
break,
5:30.
and then we will
At
continue
5:30,
again.
inshallah,
So
God
with,
willing, we will have 50 minutes break. Then we will proceed again, and we will proceed up to from 5:45 to 6:45, and then we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we will continue again. So with no further delay, I would like to welcome our dear Dr. Leonard Sachs. And thank you for coming. He is amazing. His talks are amazing. His books are amazing. And by the way, we're giving away 6 of his books. We're going to have some MCQ. So if you guys are taking notes or watching out what he says, you may get those books for one of those books for free. We welcome Dr. Sachs. Please, Dr. Sachs, take the mic.
Well, thank you for those very kind words, and thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to share with your community. As I mentioned a moment ago, I prepared a handout for you. The handout is, first of all, the notes that I would take if I were attending this workshop. So all the main points of the talk are in the handout. But I'm also going to be presenting a lot of research. I'm going to be citing a lot of studies. All those studies are mentioned in your handout, and the links to the primary sources are available. You don't need the handout now, and I would encourage you not to pull it up now. It's 16 pages, single-spaced, and it's not intended to be to accompany the talk. It's meant as a resource for you to consult after the talk. And I'll show you this link again. So I want to begin this afternoon with a quiz question for you. This question is based on a longitudinal cohort study. That means a study. That's not my baby. That's my baby there. Sarah, say hello. All right. So this is a study in which researchers followed a large group of children from childhood through adolescence and right into adulthood, all the way through 32 years of age. When each one of these kids was 12 years old, they brought them in for a full-day psychological assessment to quantify for each one of these kids their openness to new ideas, their grades at school, their emotional stability, their friendliness and agreeableness, and self-control. These are all things that you can quantify if you have the opportunity to do a comprehensive psychological assessment with valid measures. So they did that when each of these individuals were 12 years old, and then they followed them for another 20 years. So this is just an enormous investment of time and energy following this large cohort for 32 years, actually, because they recruited them shortly after birth. At 32 years of age, so 20 years after the assessment at age 12, at 32 years of age, you track each one of these kids down. They're not kids anymore, they're adults, they're 32 years old. And you interview them, you contact them, you get all kinds of information on them, and you determine their health, their wealth, and their happiness, their life satisfaction, again, using validated measures. One of the 5 parameters shown here, openness to new ideas, grades at school, emotional stability, friendliness and agreeableness, self-control. One of those 5 characteristics measured at 12 years of age powerfully and accurately predicts health and wealth and happiness 20 years later. But only one of these 5. The other 4 predict one or none of the 3 principal outcomes, the 3 principal outcomes being health, wealth, and happiness. It's great fun when I get to do these presentations in person because I then ask the audience to raise their hands. Who thinks it's openness to new ideas? Who thinks it's grades at school? Who thinks it's emotional stability? Who thinks it's friendliness and agreeableness? Who thinks it's self-control? I've done this presentation all across the United States and Canada for many years now, actually, and I can tell you that nobody thinks it's grades in school. Nobody raises their hand saying that grades in school is the one key parameter. We'll come back to that because I think it's important. Most people in the United States think it's either emotional stability or self-control or grades at school or, emotional stability or self-control or openness to new ideas, one of those three. Very few Americans think it's friendliness and no Americans think it's emotional stability. What's the correct answer? I'm going to keep you in suspense. I'm not going to tell you right now. You need to stick around. And sometime after the call to prayer, after we return, I will share the answer, and I'm hoping that I will share more. My objective this evening is to share with you some evidence-based strategies that will improve the odds for your son, for your daughter, to improve the odds that they will do well, that they will fulfill their potential. But let's start by going back. I want to go back to 1964. In that year, researchers concluded that new immigrants to the United States who've just arrived here from overseas are at higher risk of becoming anxious and depressed, and their kids are at higher risk of becoming anxious and depressed compared with the children born and raised here to parents born and raised in the United States. And the monograph on this topic that I'm describing was published in 1964. And the researchers who published their findings in that monograph concluded that when new immigrants arrived in the United States from overseas, they should speak English and they should get their kids speaking English. They should seek to assimilate into American culture because, these researchers said, that will improve the odds for their kids. It will improve the odds that their kids will do well in school, will not be anxious and depressed, and so forth. And the very first line in your handout is that citation, a monograph published by Dr. Milton Gordon, Oxford University Press, 1964. Now, I rush to the disclaimers. I am not endorsing Dr. Gordon's recommendations. I am not suggesting that you should do what he did or what he recommended. On the contrary, I am including this study simply to document that in that era, in 1964, the children of immigrants were at a disadvantage compared to the children of people born and raised in the United States on many parameters. That was true in 1964. It is not true today. Today, the reverse is true. To understand what scholars mean by the immigrant paradox, I want you to imagine two families living right next to each other. The two families are very similar in many respects. They both consist of a mother, a father, a teenage son, and a teenage daughter. The household income is the same in both families. The occupations of the parents are the same in both families. The ages of the children are the same in both families. The main difference between these two households is that in one household, mother, father, son, and daughter were born and raised in the United States, and they speak English at home. In the adjacent household, mother, father, son, and daughter were born and raised in Bangalore, India. They've just arrived, and they do not speak English at home. They speak Gujarati in the home. Now, in which home are we more likely to find that the teenage girl is binge drinking or cutting herself with razor blades, or has been diagnosed with an eating disorder, or has been diagnosed with anxiety or depression? On each of those parameters, it is now much more likely that the American girl has each of those problems compared to the girl who just arrived here from India. In which home are we more likely to find that the son says school is a stupid waste of time, or the son has been diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, or the son has been arrested for street racing? On each of those parameters, it is much more likely that the American boy has those issues compared to the boy who just arrived here from India. But if those people from India, if the new family that just arrived here from India, if they stay here, the risk to those teenagers, to the son and the daughter in the Indian household, will begin to increase. I'm a medical doctor. I'm a practicing physician. Physicians use the term dose-response effect to describe, for example, the response to a toxin. The more you are exposed to a toxin, the more likely you are to experience a bad outcome. That's a dose-response curve. The longer that boy and that girl stay here, the more likely they are to develop these problems. Just the fact that they are from India does not by itself confer lasting protection, especially if that boy and that girl begin speaking English at home. Speaking English at home is a marker of assimilation into American culture, and it is a predictor of bad outcomes for that teenage boy and that teenage girl. Not in a week or a month, but if after 3, 4, 5 years, that boy and that girl are speaking English at home, after 3, 4, 5 years, their risk will begin to approach that of the boy and the girl next door, born and raised in this country. When scholars first identified this finding roughly 20 years ago, they were startled because they were raised on the earlier generation of work by Dr. Milton Gordon and his colleagues that I described to you from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, showing that the children of Americans had an advantage over the children of immigrants. So they were startled to discover that that is no longer true, that the reverse is now true, that the children of immigrants now have an advantage over the children of parents born and raised here in the United States. The children of parents born and raised here in the United States are now more likely to be binge drinking, cutting themselves with razor blades, have anxiety, depression, disengaged from school, and on and on and on, compared to the children of immigrants. And so they coined the phrase the immigrant paradox, because it seemed paradoxical to them that the children of immigrants just arrived in the United States now have a great advantage over the children of parents born and raised in the United States, and that speaking English at home is now a major risk factor for bad outcomes, which was emphatically not true in the 60s, 70s, or 80s, but it is true today. American popular culture has become toxic to children and teenagers. And that's not a rant, it's not a guess, it's a robust empirical finding. 2 pages of your handout, and you'll have to scroll down to the bottom because I've found it's confusing to people if the first 2 pages of the handout are all links to research on the immigrant paradox. But if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll find that 2 pages, I've included 2 pages, and there's more, but these 2 pages is a good start, of studies showing that the children of immigrants now do better than the children of people born and raised in the United States, and that if those children of immigrants begin speaking English, that's a predictor of bad outcomes. So again, our focus this afternoon, this evening, is on practical suggestions that you can use that cost nothing. And here's my first practical evidence-based suggestion. If you grew up speaking a language that is not English, speak your native language at home and insist that your kids speak your native language and teach it to them. And create get-togethers. It's a little difficult right now because of the pandemic, but create connection with other families in the neighborhood, in the area that speak your language. So I've done a great many presentations for the Islamic Association of Greater Detroit, IAGD. I think 7 or 8 presentations over the years. And I was speaking to these parents, I think it was in Novi or Farmington Hills. And at the end of my presentation, a mother and father spoke to me. They were both born and raised in Syria, and they have a son and a daughter. And they normally speak Arabic at home. But they told me that when their son wants to be disrespectful, he switches to English. And Dad told me that the boy's whole body language changed. His eyes narrow. He gets a smirk on his face, and he starts speaking in English. And Dad told me it's like Justin Bieber just walked into the house. American English has become the language of disrespect. And that's new. What happened? Why is becoming American and participating in American culture now a major risk factor for anxiety, depression, drug and alcohol use, disengagement from school, and many other bad outcomes? Again, I've lived all my life here in the United States. I'm old enough to remember when kids born and raised in the United States to parents born and raised in the United States outperformed the children of immigrants who had recently arrived, outperformed them academically. Today, the reverse is true. My brother is academic dean at a small college in Southern Ohio. Almost all the students there were born and raised in the United States to parents who were born and raised in the United States. There's only a handful of immigrants. But that handful of immigrant children, who account for maybe 3% of the population, take all the academic honors. They win the spelling bee, they're the valedictorian, it is unusual, he told me, for any kid born and raised in the United States to earn any academic honors if any of these kids are participating. The immigrant kids blow the native-born American kids away. And that's not just my brother's neighborhood. That is a robust finding across the United States on so many parameters. I mean, we could, and I have done presentations primarily just on this one finding, the immigrant paradox. The fact that the children of immigrants, if they do not speak English at home, now outperform American kids speaking English born to American parents born and raised in the United States. How come? What happened? And it's happened recently. So here's a graph, and this is all before the pandemic, looking at the percentage of individuals with a major depressive episode, depression, in the past 12 months by age group. Well, you go back 10 years, 2010. Older people are always happier than young people. That's a robust finding worldwide. And it's true in the United States as it is true everywhere else. So the oldest people are the least likely to be depressed. You look at 2010 and 2011, you find that all the younger people are pretty much clustering around an 8% rate. But then in 2010, something happened. And the rate of depression for the youngest individuals, 12 to 17 years of age, the dashed line, let me just show this with my pointer here. So the 12 to 17 years of age is the dashed line here. The 18 to 25 years of age is the solid line. Beginning about 10 years ago, the rate of depression soared. And there's no taper in that trend line. Again, a serious psychological distress in the last month. We don't have this for the 12 to 17-year-olds, but certainly we can see that for the youngest adults, just soaring, and this is all before the pandemic. I've got another presentation on what's happened since the pandemic, but I want to focus just on this trend that was clearly in place well before the pandemic of soaring rates of depression among the youngest Americans, age 12 to 25. What's going on? I've got something strange here going on with my arrow. I'm not sure how to do that. Trying to get rid of that arrow and it won't go away. Anyhow, let's go back 50 years. 50 years ago, Dr. Coleman, that arrow is very distracting to me. How am I going to get rid of it?
That arrow is a whiteboard arrow. If you, there is an option to disable all the drawing from all the participants. I don't have that control because you're sharing.
Oh, all right. So I'm going to stop my share and then I'm going to restart my share. Let's see if that'll do it. That did it. Thank you. All right. So James Coleman, sociologist at Johns Hopkins, back in the 1960s, led teams of high school students across the United States, led teams of graduate students across the United States interviewing high school kids, doing structured interviews. And one of the questions he would always ask, he'd ask them, if all your friends wanted you to join a particular club, but one of your parents did not approve, would you still join? Would you join the club that all your friends wanted you to join if one of your parents did not approve? And back in that era, more than 50 years ago, the majority of high school kids told him no, they would not join. They valued the opinion of their parents more than they valued the opinion of all their peers. So between 2011 and 2019, I asked American middle school and high school kids an updated version of Dr. Coleman's question. I asked them, if all your friends want you to sign up for a particular social media app, would you ask your parents? Would you consult your parents first? And the most common answer I got from American kids was not yes, it wasn't no, it was laughter. Kids would burst out laughing. As one girl said last year, she said, my parents would probably think TikTok is some kind of alarm clock. You know, why would I ask them? These kids may say they love their parents, but they care more about what other kids think than they care about parents think. It was not true in the United States a generation ago. It is true today. And it really matters. Most cultures have been characterized by strong attachment across generations. But today, scholars find the primary attachment of American children and teens is to their same age peers, which is just a fancy scholarly way of saying that kids care more about what their same age peers think than they care about what their parents think. And that matters because good parents offer unconditional attachment and affection, but same age peers generally don't. Good parents nurture, but that kid's own age generally can't. Good parents sacrifice for their kids without expecting anything in return, but same age peers rarely do so for their friends. So that's my daughter, Sarah, 14 years of age. There she is with her grandpa. Suppose she were to say to me, I hate you. I'm never going to talk to you ever again as long as I live. What would happen? She's never said that, but let's suppose that she did say that. Well, her mother and I would discuss and consult what privileges she would lose and for how long as a result of that outburst, but nothing fundamental would change. She would not lose her place in our house. We would not stop loving her. There's nothing that she can do or say that would cause us to stop loving her. And she knows that. And we are her primary attachment. So she can relax because that foundation, our love for her, will not change, is not in question. But suppose she says those same words to a friend at school. I hate you. I'm never going to talk to you ever again as long as I live. Well, that friendship is over, or it is at least badly damaged. Peer relations are contingent and ephemeral, which is, again, just a fancy way of saying they can change overnight. And every kid knows it. Every girl knows you can go from being the most popular girl to being the odd girl out in one day, in 5 minutes. You want to see a typical American teenage girl have a total meltdown? It's very simple. Here's how you do it. You take her phone from her without warning, and she will totally freak out. She'll be like, Sonia doesn't know I don't have my phone. What happens if she texts me and I don't answer her? What happens if she texts me and I don't call her back or get back to her? She's going to think I don't like her. She's going to think I'm ignoring her. As I said, you can go from being the most popular girl to being the odd girl out in 5 minutes, and they all know it. So they're all glued to their phones. Most cultures have taught kids to respect parents. Again, this is not a guess. I cite all the comparative anthropologists looking at cultures around the world today and going back. And it's true of our own culture. By our culture, I mean the culture of Americans born and raised in the United States who speak English at home. You go back a generation, the most popular TV shows were The Dick Van Dyke Show, My Three Sons, The Andy Griffith Show. The parents in these shows were, without exception, competent, responsible, thoughtful, productive, caring, kind. And these were the most popular TV shows of that era. That's not characteristic of American television today. The longest running TV show on American television right now, more than 600 episodes, The Simpsons. Homer Simpson is a bum. His son's an idiot. His wife varies. Sometimes she's wise, more often she is not. The only one of the four principals who's always wise and insightful is the daughter, Lisa. But I'm not picking on The Simpsons. I really have great respect for this show, at least in its first 12 to 15 seasons. I thought they had great insight into what's really going on. In one episode, you get to see inside Homer Simpson's brain. Homer Simpson's brain has three major drives: sleep, donuts, and beer. There's great insight there. If you imagine an American television show depicting the brain of an American middle-aged man 50 years ago, it probably would have shown his entire brain as a sex drive. That was the stereotype of American men 50 years ago. They were only interested in sex. Not anymore. Now it's sleep, donuts, and beer. Again, there's great insight there. The testosterone levels of young American men have fallen by half over the last 60 years. The sperm counts of American men have fallen by more than half over the last 50 years. So again, the writers have real insight, I think, into what's happening. In writing my book, The Collapse of Parenting, I reviewed the 150 most popular TV shows in the United States to see how many of them depict a parent as knowledgeable, competent, thoughtful, responsible. Not always, but at least occasionally, depict a parent respectfully. Out of 150 TV shows, I found one, only one, Blue Bloods, starring Tom Selleck, shown here, that occasionally or often depicts a parent as knowledgeable, competent, respectable. That wasn't me. Somebody else just drew that line. Blue Bloods is no longer characteristic of American television. What's characteristic of American television would be a show like Modern Family, shown here, where the straight dad is always an incompetent fool, or almost always, very often. And we're supposed to laugh at him. His three kids are usually wiser and more insightful than their idiot dad. Some parents think, oh, the Disney Channel. Disney Channel's got to be good. That's family friendly, right? No, not right. The Disney Channel is a major vector of what I've come to call the culture of disrespect. This Disney Channel show, Dog with a Blog, the father, supposedly a school psychologist, knows nothing about what kids want or need. The talking dog is always wiser and more insightful than the clueless dad. This Disney Channel show, Liv and Maddie, the two girls, are as different as they can be. The one thing they agree on is that their mom, also supposedly a school psychologist, knows nothing about what kids want or need. The two girls roll their eyes in disbelief at the ridiculous, clueless, out-of-touch suggestions made by their idiot mom. This is characteristic of American television. Girls and boys are not born knowing what it means to be ladies and gentlemen. They have to be taught, and we no longer teach them. By we, I mean American popular culture. And so kids turn to the marketplace, and the marketplace has changed. That's Sam Cooke. More than 50 years ago, Sam Cooke had a #1 hit song in the United States, which I remember hearing on the radios growing up. He sang, "Don't Know Much About History." He sang, "Now, I don't claim to be an A student, but I'm trying to be, because maybe by being an A student, baby, I could win your love for me." He goes on to mention, friend, earning an A, he will raise his status in the eyes of the pretty girl. And that was a #1 hit song here in the United States. It was characteristic of American culture in that era, a generation ago, that working hard to earn good marks at school would raise your status in the eyes of your peers. In that era, American popular culture, the culture of people who spoke English at home, was the culture of the Beatles, of Simon and Garfunkel, of Petula Clark, of Aretha Franklin. That is not the culture in which American kids who speak English at home are now living. American kids who speak English at home are now living and immersed in what I call the culture of disrespect, contemporary American popular culture. So earlier this year, Cardi B and her colleague Megan Thee Stallion broke all kinds of records with their song WAP, W-A-P, #1 hit song in the United States. WAP is an acronym for vaginal lubrication, and the song itself is a hymn to the mechanics of sexual intercourse. There is no mention of love or relationship. It's just about vaginal lubrication. And as I said, it broke many records in the United States. Broke the record for most streams of a video in 1 week's time. First video in history, in the history of our planet, to get 93 million streams in 1 week. Debuted at #1 on Billboard's Top 100, the most popular songs in the United States. It was the most popular song in the United States and spent 10 weeks in the top 3. And the language is unprintable and offensive. The F word, the N word, the A word, of course, is in the title. I'm not going to read these lyrics because they are deeply offensive. But this was the #1 hit song in the United States. And not only was it the #1 hit song, it got ecstatic reviews across the spectrum. You know, people talk about how different left and right are in the United States, how different the New York Times is from the Wall Street Journal. Not on this parameter. They all agreed that this song is wonderful. The New York Times reviewer was thrilled by the song's praise of female sexual desire. The Wall Street Journal praised the song as historic evidence that women artists are finally making their mark. Teen Vogue, which is targeting teenage girls in the United States, claimed that women everywhere rejoiced in the glory of this song. Another woman praised the song's promotion of sexual agency, and her tweet got over 110,000 likes on Twitter. When a boy sees the most popular video in the United States, the #1 video on YouTube, the #1 hit on the Billboard Top 100, presents women who describes themselves as looking for a beating, and that video is praised by women writing for the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Teen Vogue, how is that boy supposed to know that not all women are looking for a man to beat them up and choke them? How is he supposed to know if he has received no instruction? So I wrote an article on this song for an online journal called Public Discourse. The link is in your handout. If you'd like to read those reviews from the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Teen Vogue, and learn more about this song, I hope you'll take a look at my article. But it's not just this song. This song is not exceptional. It's typical. That's why it was a #1 hit song. It's nothing unusual. Bruno Mars got 6 Grammys for his song titled That's What I Like. Lyrics: I got a condo in Manhattan, baby girl, what's happening? You and your blank invited. So turn around and drop it for a player. Drop it for me. That's a screenshot from the video, which has had over 1.4 billion views. That's billion with a B, as in Bruno. So he's talking to a woman he appears not to know. And he offers her first champagne, then diamonds, then a shopping spree in Paris, and finally offers just to hand her his wallet and his credit cards if she will just turn around and drop it for a player, because that's what I like. He's offering money for sex. Again, no mention of love or relationship or courtesy or respect. Money makes her smile. This is now characteristic of American popular culture. You know, the Grammys 2018 were weird because famous actress Janelle Monáe gets up and gives this little sermon about, she says, I'm here to tell you the time is up for sexual harassment of any kind. Time is up. Time's up. And she got a big standing ovation for her little sermon denouncing sexual harassment. And a few minutes later, Bruno Mars accepted his Grammy for Best Song for a song celebrating sexual harassment. And I think about it for a moment. Suppose a young man in the workplace approaches a female colleague and says, "Hey, baby girl, what's happening? You and your blank invited. So turn around and drop it for a player," and offers her money. Well, he'd be fired. Or he would at least be disciplined. He'd be required to go to some kind of workshop to learn about sexual harassment, where he would learn that offering a woman, a female colleague in the workplace, money for sex is never acceptable. But he might reasonably respond, "Hey, that's exactly what Bruno Mars did in his song, and he got 6 Grammys. How is a boy supposed to know if he has received no instruction? Boys and girls are not born knowing what it means to be gentlemen and ladies. They have to be taught. And we no longer teach them. On the contrary, if they speak English at home and they have internet access, they are immersed in a culture that is teaching them some very harmful things, teaching them that it's cool to be disrespectful. So the first chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, is devoted to documenting and defending that claim that American popular culture, the culture of the most popular YouTube videos, the #1 hit songs, the most followed celebrities on Instagram, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is now a culture in which kids are taught that it's cute and funny to be disrespectful. Now, disclaimer, I am not saying that American popular culture is utterly depraved. American popular culture is like a big city. There are some great things going on. There's an art museum, a science museum, a history museum, but there are also high crime neighborhoods. You wouldn't let your kid wander in a big city without adult guidance. You should not let your kid have unlimited exposure to American popular culture, which we now know to be a toxic culture. You must limit your kid's exposure. And that means you must have a parental monitoring app on every device that your kid uses, on their tablet, on their phone, on their laptop. I'm going to talk more about parental monitoring apps. But I also want to apologize and explain for including some very offensive words in my slides so far. These are the most popular videos. These are the most popular songs in American popular culture. If you do not limit your kids' exposure to American popular culture, these are the songs and the videos that your kid will encounter at great harm. And I've done many presentations for the Muslim community. I'm not Muslim, but I've done many, I'm very grateful to have had the opportunity. And sometimes Muslim parents will say, Dr. Sachs, I understand your concern, but this really doesn't apply to us. My daughter wears a head covering. My son can quote can quote at great length from the Quran. So I don't think really this applies to us. Usra Hamzavi is a Muslim psychiatrist who attended my workshop, and she told me how she encounters parents who say, "Oh, this doesn't apply to us because we're Muslim." And she gave me the following statement for me to read to you. Dr. Usra Hamzavi wants you to know that the Islamic community is not exempt from these issues. Young people are not safeguarded just because they are Muslim. Parents must be knowledgeable and vigilant. So I did this presentation for another Muslim group, and another Muslim psychiatrist came up to me and explained that she's a child psychiatrist, and she is often encountering parents who say, "Oh, I don't have to worry about this American culture because, my kids are very devout and we're Muslim." And here she wants you to know that being Muslim does not protect your child from American culture. She said parents must be aware and protect their children. So if you're wondering, why would I include such awful, offensive lyrics in a presentation for parents? It's because you must know that if your kid has internet access and they speak English and they understand English, and this is what they are likely going to be exposed to unless you prevent it. We'll talk more about parental monitoring apps in a moment, but I think it's very important. So the issues I've talked about so far, the breaking of bonds across generations, kids prioritizing same-age peers, the toxicity of American culture, those issues affect girls and boys equally. But the next issues we're going to address are gender specific. The next issue we're going to address affects boys more than girls. And then after the break for prayer, we're going to talk about an issue that affects girls more than boys. So I wrote a book called Boys Adrift. The 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. Of course, I begin by documenting across the United States, across demographic groups, you find that boys are falling farther and farther behind their sisters. In school and in many other parameters, boys doing less well than their sisters. That wasn't true a generation ago. It is true today. And it's true not primarily because girls are doing better, but because boys are doing worse, as I show in the book. This is not the Boys Adrift talk, so we're not going to go into all 5 factors. We're just going to focus on one, which is video games. So researchers find that girls and boys tend to play different video games, and they tend to play them differently. So right now, Candy Crush is very popular with American girls, so is Homescapes. When you look to see who spent more than 2 hours in the last week playing Candy Crush or Homescapes, you find that girls greatly outnumber boys. Most popular video games for American boys right now are Minecraft, Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto. Fortnite's falling fast, but still in the number 4 slot in the latest numbers. RDR2. Average girl playing Candy Crush or Homescapes typically spends about 20 minutes in a session. Average boy playing Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto typically spends about 2.5 hours in a session. So what's the relationship between how much time you spend playing video games and how well you do in school? Well, researchers find that there is no relationship until a threshold of about 6 hours a week. Boy who spends on average 5 hours a week playing video games doesn't do any better or worse on average than boy doesn't play video games at all. Beyond that threshold of 6 hours a week, there is a linear and negative trend. Boy who spends 10 hours a week playing video games does less well than the boy who spends 5 hours a week playing video games. Boys who spends 20 hours a week playing video games does much less well. And I spoke to Craig Anderson by phone. He's the lead investigator on this study, and I asked him, why is that? And he answered with one word. He said, displacement. Displacement. What does he mean by displacement? What he means by displacement is that if you spend 20 hours a week playing video games, that's 20 hours a week you're not doing something else, like studying or sleeping. The average American boy now spends just over 9 hours a week playing video games, compared to about 90 minutes a week for the average girl. So these guidelines are in your handout based on the research. No more than 40 minutes a night on school nights playing video games, no more than an hour a day on weekends, and your minutes do not roll over. So if you go 3 weeks without playing video games, that does not mean that you're allowed to spend 7 hours on a Minecraft binge on a Saturday. That is binge gaming, and it is harmful. No screen time until all the chores are done and all the homework is done. No devices in the bedroom. No video game console in the bedroom. That's not just my recommendation. Those are the official guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics, and we'll come back to those guidelines. Scholars define a violent game as a game in which you must kill humans in order to win. So Anderson and Gentili did this remarkable study. They recruited more than 3,000 kids at 11 or 12 years of age, and then followed each of these kids for at least 3 years. At enrollment, when the kids are 11 or 12, they do a comprehensive psychological assessment to quantify for each one of these kids, to what extent is this particular kid altruistic or selfish, honest or dishonest, patient or impatient, gentle or hostile. And then, as I said, they followed these kids for 3 years. So to conceptualize this study, imagine you got 2 boys, both 12 years of age, both identical. And by identical, I mean same demographics, same race, ethnicity, household income, language spoken at home, family composition, and parental involvement. And Both these boys spend 20 hours a week playing video games. The only difference between these two boys is one boy, his parents will not allow him to play violent games. So he's playing mostly sports games, Madden NFL football, NBA basketball, FIFA soccer. The boy next door, he's in his bedroom with the door closed, headset on. Parents have no idea what games he's playing. He's playing Call of Duty, Grand Theft Auto, RDR2, violent games. At enrollment, these boys are identical on all these psychological parameters: altruism, honesty, patience, etc. But over 3 years, the boy, not over a week or a month, but over 3 years' time, the boy playing the violent games changes. He becomes more selfish, less honest, less patient. And after 3 years, the difference between these two boys, who were identical on these parameters at enrollment, after 3 years, the difference between these two boys is quite large. After 3 years, the difference between these two boys is comparable to the difference between a boy raised in a loving and nurturing home all his life and a boy raised in a violent and abusive home all his life. Some violent games are worse than others. And by worse, I mean they push this change from honest to dishonest, from patient to impatient, from altruistic to selfish, faster and farther than other games. The worst games are games which employ what Anderson and Gentile call a moral inversion. A moral inversion means that in the context of the game, good is bad and bad is good. So for example, in Grand Theft Auto, in order to achieve your mission, you will have to acquire money and weapons. And you can get the best weapons by killing police officers. So in the context of the game, it'd be a really great idea to sneak up on some police officers and kill them before they know what you're up to. And that way you get their weapons. That's the only way you can get their weapons. You have to kill them. Now in the real world, to sneak up on police officers and kill them just because they're police officers would be evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. If you want to play Grand Theft Auto with a pre-made avatar, you will have to play as a man. There are no female avatars in the game. There are women in the game. Many of them are prostitutes. If you're wounded in your firefight with a police officer, you can restore your health to 100% by having sex with a prostitute. You go up to her, you ask her how much. She tells you, you give her the money, and then you have sex with her, meaning you watch your avatar flopping on top of her. But that will cost you money. You don't have to do this, but it makes good sense in the context of the game to then take out your big knife and stab her to death. And as she very realistically collapses to the floor and dies, you get your money back. That's the only way you can get your money back. You have to kill her. Now, in the real world, to kill a prostitute to get your money back would be insane and evil. But in the context of this game, it is a good and clever thing to do. And this is the third most popular video game in the United States right now, and it's 7 years old, GTA 5. When GTA 6 comes out next year, all the experts say it will rocket to #1. And of course, when GTA 5 came out, it was #1 in the United States. And lawmakers in California were like, are you kidding me? The most popular video game in the United States is a game which the researchers have shown changes personality, causes kids to become less patient, less honest, more selfish. They flew Anderson and Gentile to Sacramento and heard their testimony and wrote a law. The California statute made it a civil offense to sell not any violent game, but the worst violent games, games like Grand Theft Auto, to any child under 18 years of age. Basically, the California law put these games into the same category as cigarettes, put them behind the counter. You'd have to show ID, show that you're at least 18 years of age to buy the game. But the video game industry immediately filed suit, claiming that the California statute violates their First Amendment right of free speech. That's not me. Thank you. violates their First Amendment right of free speech. And the lawsuit went to the United States Supreme Court. And in a decision written by the late Justice Antonin Scalia, the United States Supreme Court agreed with the video game industry and threw out the California statute, rendering it null and void. Justice Samuel Alito wrote a concurrence saying, hey, I share the concerns of California lawmakers and California parents. I have read the research of Anderson and Gentili. No child, no teenager should be playing these games where you get rewarded for killing police officers, rewarded for killing unarmed civilians. But he continued, nevertheless, it is the ruling of this court that deciding what games children will play is not the job of the California State Assembly, it is the job of the parent. And I have included a link to the full text of Justice Alito's concurrence in your handout, because you need to understand this is your job. You must limit, govern, and guide what games your son is playing. Again, some parents are offended that I include screenshots, which incidentally are very tame screenshots. I could have chosen much worse from Grand Theft Auto. Why do I include these images? Because you have to understand, if your son is in his bedroom with the door closed, that could be the game he's playing. It's immensely popular with American boys right now. It is your job to limit, govern, and guide what games your son is playing. It is your job when your son goes over to a friend's house to call the friend's parents and say, hey, my son's going to be hanging with your son tomorrow afternoon. Will there be a parent around to make sure they're not playing games like Grand Theft Auto? And if the other parent says, hey, they go in the bedroom, close the door, I'm not going to waste my time chaperoning what video games two teenage boys are playing, then you must say to your son, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to go to that boy's house. You must know what games your son is playing. Now, how are you supposed to do that? Are you supposed to sit down and play every one of these games or watch every one of these games being played? No, you're busy. You got other things to do. I do recommend commonsense.org. Common Sense Media provides reviews of these games by parents, carefully vetted. These are parents who have no connection to the video game industry. And believe me, the video game industry makes every effort to infiltrate these sites. But this site is well funded and well protected against the video game industry. And you can trust this site. I have no affiliation with Common Sense Media, but they will give you some good advice about what games are okay to play and what games are not okay. Hassan, my phone is showing 6:30, and my instructions are that that's the point where we're supposed to break for prayer. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Thank you. I was about to request.
Thank you so much. Yes, for timing yourself. We really appreciate it. And Salah Adhan has just gone off. So, alhamdulillah.
Okay, at 5:45, I will log back on and we'll continue.
Awesome.
Awesome. Hassan, can you please share the video, the slides we talked about while we're
They're on.
on our break?
They're
Oh,
on.
you have it. Right. Thank you. Barakallah.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay.
A note for everybody, you're welcome to stay and just wait it out, or you guys can sign out and come back. It's up to you, but I encourage you all to just stay, and it's just easier instead of just going back and forth. Awesome. We'll see you shortly. Thank you. Dr. Sachs, please go ahead and share your screen as before. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we're starting in 1 minute. For those of us who came late to this amazing workshop, I would like to tell you all that my name is Dalia Metwali. I'm the principal of Mariam Islamic Center Weekend School. I'm also an ICNA teacher and I teach at college. And our amazing speaker is Dr. Leonard Sachs. Our workshop is evidence-based parenting. Dr. Sachs is bringing so much experience, so much into this workshop. We as a Muslim community just need to understand what's happening around us, and we need to kind of, see how we best can deal with our children. With this being said, Dr. Leonard Sachs, please take the mic and resume. Jazakumullahu khair. Thank you so much.
Oh, all right. Thank you. So video games are kind of more of a boys issue, as we've seen boys are more likely than girls to spend many hours a week playing video games. But girls have their own issues. Let me screen share here. And I'm talking now about social media. And this has happened quickly. According to Nielsen, more than 50% of American girls at 12 years of age are now on Instagram. Instagram is barely 10 years old. And it's a big part of the lived experience now of American teenage girls. To understand why that matters, and why that matters for girls more than boys, I want you to imagine a girl living in ancient times. By ancient times, I mean the year 2000, 20 years ago. It's the evening. She's writing in her diary, by which I mean she's writing with a pen in a bound volume of blank pages. She's writing about who she likes, who she doesn't like, the kind of girl she most admires, the kind of woman she hopes to become, what she really wants out of life. She's doing some very important work. Might write 5 pages in an evening. She's not going to show that to anybody. If she has a younger brother, she might keep it under lock and key, but she's doing important work. She's figuring out, what do I really want? What's important to me? Fast forward to today. When I meet with middle school kids, high school kids, I'll ask them, who here is on Instagram? Most of the hands go up. Who's on Facebook? Very few hands. Who's on TikTok? All the hands. Who here has a diary? In a room of 300 kids, 4 hands go up. Then I ask them, what's the difference between writing in a diary and posting on Instagram? And a girl raises her hand and she says, Instagram is public, diary is private. Bingo. Yeah, that's right. When scholars look at how American kids use Instagram or other social media, they don't find any 5-page essays about what I really want out of life. They found pictures, lots and lots of pictures. That's true of girls, that's true of boys. But the pictures that girls put up are different from the pictures boys put up. A boy and a girl both go to the football game, and they both take pictures of the football game. But the boy is taking a picture of the game. Whoop, I didn't do that. Or the pretty cheerleader at the game. The girl is turning her phone on herself, and she's taking 100 selfies at the game. And then that evening, she's going through those 100 selfies and she's finding 2 or 3 where she's laughing and the kids around her are laughing. And that's what she's posting on her Instagram. Here I am at the game. We all had a great time. Mike Stefanone has found that girls post 5 times as many photos as the boys do. And again, the photos are different. The difference between writing in a diary and posting on Instagram is the difference between living and performing. Social media, as used by American kids, is a performance. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. A performance is a show that you put on to entertain or amuse other people. I don't see anything intrinsically wrong with that, as long as you understand that the performance has to come to an end and you're going to take off your mask and resume your real life. My concern, listening to American girls, is that for many of them, they're trapped in what I've come to call the cyber bubble of 24/7 texting and social media, and the performance never ends. The mask never comes off. and it is exhausting and it is draining. These girls are hyper-connected to other girls their own age, but they are disconnected from themselves. Disconnected from themselves. We now have a number of studies showing that the more time a teenager spends on social media like Instagram, the more likely that kid is to become depressed. So this is a longitudinal cohort study. And again, the link to the study is in your handout. So they followed this group of kids and looked to see to what extent are these kids looking at other kids' Instagram, social comparison, and looking to see how many likes the kid got on their own Instagram, feedback seeking, and then the risk of becoming depressed. And the more engaged you are on Instagram, the more time you're spending on Instagram, the more likely you are to become depressed. And that was, whoa, hang on. That was true for girls, and it was true for boys. Here's my clicker here. True for boys, the boys are the dashed line, but it's a much bigger effect for girls, much bigger effect for girls than it is for boys. So other researchers, different cohorts have come to the same conclusion. The more time kids spend on social media, the more likely that kid is to become depressed, and that effect is much larger for girls than it is for boys. Why? Why the difference between girls and boys? Well, one of the studies that gives us some insight comes from Carol Dweck and her colleagues at Stanford, who found that girls are very ready to believe that other girls are having more fun than they are, that other girls' lives are more interesting than their own life is. This turns out to be not at all true for boys. Turns out that boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to other people. And girls use social media differently than boys do. So a boy and a girl both get sick. They both throw up. The boy posts a photo of his own vomit on his Instagram. Girls never do that. So imagine a girl looking at the other girls' pages. There's Emily at the football game. She's having a great time. There's Manis at the party. She's having a blast. There's Vanessa with her new puppy. Isn't it cute? I'm just sitting here not doing anything. My life sucks. The more time a kid spends on social media like Instagram, the more likely they are to become depressed. That's a much larger effect for girls than it is for boys. And you now understand three mechanisms that drive that difference between girls and boys. First of all, girls are more invested in their posts. They post 5 times as many photos as the boys do, and the photos are different. If you don't like Jake's photo of the pretty cheerleader, he doesn't care. But if you don't like Emily's photo of Emily, she's going to take it personally. And girls post mostly the fun stuff, the happy stuff. This boy looking at Jacob's vomit or Brett's dead dog is unlikely to want to be Jake or Brett. And boys greatly overestimate how interesting their own life is to begin with. So boys are, to some degree, on average, protected from the toxic effects of social media. Girls are more vulnerable. Now, a mature adult could explain that everybody's life is a mixture of happy and sad, of success and disappointment. But there's usually no mature adult with that girl. So what can you do about it regarding social media? Well, first of all, you got to realize most 14-year-olds are not masters of time management. So in one study, they asked this 14-year-old girl, how much time were you on Instagram last night? And she said, 40 minutes. It was actually more than 2 hours, but I don't think she was lying. I think she lost track of time. This is where you have an important role. You must inculcate good habits, and you do that with parental monitoring software. Now, I devote a page of your handout to listing the different apps and the pros and cons, and Apple versus Samsung versus Android. I don't want to go into that here. Our time is limited. I just want you to understand you must install some parental monitoring software that will limit how much time your kid is spending on social media. All of the apps I list will do that. And the first thing I want to do is just show you what your kid's doing. I am not suggesting that you prohibit social media. I'm suggesting that you limit social media. 30 minutes a day. 2 hours a day is too much. And again, all these apps will report to you on your phone what your kid's doing how much time they're spending on social media. And you say to your kid, look, my parents insisted on knowing where I was at all times. I have to know where you are at all times, except now it's not out there, it's online. I will know everything you're doing online because that's my job as your parent. No more than 40 minutes a day. Where does that come from? Well, it comes from a huge study done by Jean Twenge, looking at data from more than 220,000 kids. And on the x-axis is the time spent on social media like Instagram. On the y-axis is the risk of becoming anxious or depressed. Now, the previous study was linear, but that was a much smaller group. Jean Twenge's study, using more sophisticated statistics, finds what they call a curvilinear association, basically flat up to 40 minutes a day, and then an inflection point at 40 minutes a day, and a pretty linear and ascending relationship after 40 minutes a day. Why 40 minutes a day? Kids who are spending 10 or 20 or 30 minutes a day on social media are using social media to facilitate their real life. Hey, did you hear Jake and Sonia just broke up? Hey, you come into the party Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock. They're using social media to keep up with what's going on and to facilitate their social life. Beyond 40 minutes a day, if kids spending more than 40 minutes a day on social media, they're producing, they're creating videos, they're creating photos to share on social media. Why is that a problem? It's a problem because social media is not fair. I have counseled teenage girls who have spent hours. I'm thinking of this one girl who put many hours and lots of her own money into creating the perfect TikTok video, 32 seconds long, hysterically funny, very well produced, very funny. And after 3 weeks, she's got 46 views and some very negative comments. And she shows me another video that's had 17 million views, 17 million views, much less funny, much less professional. And she's like, why? I put all that work in and I got nothing, nothing. Social media is unfair that way. And we all read stories about this kid just put a little video together in a few minutes and got 17 million views, and now he's a celebrity. And that's the stories we see. We don't see the stories of the dozens, hundreds, thousands of other kids who put in more time, more effort, made better video, but lightning didn't strike. What predicts whether one TikTok video is successful and another is not? Even the experts can't tell you. You don't want your kid to be investing their life in making a TikTok video. Very unwise investment. The odds of success, of a payoff, are in the order of 1,000,000 to 1. Be much better off trying to play in the National Football League. Odds are much better. That was a joke. Girls are going to bed with their phones switched on. At 2 in the morning, your daughter's getting a text. OMG, Jake and Emily just broke up. We all have to talk about this. Parents are amazed to find that half the 9th grade class is awake and texting at 2 in the morning. Look, the rules of good parenting have not changed in 20 years. But 20 years ago, a girl could not accept a phone call from a friend to gossip at 2 in the morning because the phone would ring and the parents would not allow it because they knew it's more important for a kid to get a good night's sleep than be up for an hour in the middle of the night gossiping. That was true 20 years ago, and it's still true today. The only, the only thing that's changed is the technology. It's now very easy for your daughter to accept that text because the phone never rang, it buzzed. She has her phone on vibrate mode, and she's not talking, she's texting. But just because it's easy doesn't mean it should happen. This is your job as the parent. At 9 o'clock at night, the very latest, you take the phone from your son and your daughter, you switch it off, you put it in the charger, which from now on is going to be in the parents' bedroom. They can have it back tomorrow morning. Look, this has to be your job. It is not reasonable. It is not age appropriate to put this burden in the lap of your 14-year-old. What's she supposed to say tomorrow in school when her friend says, hey, I texted you last night at midnight. How come you didn't answer? Is your 14-year-old daughter supposed to say, Well, researchers at Stanford have found that sleep deprivation is a major risk factor in the etiology of depression. Come on, that's ridiculous. You can't expect a kid to talk that way. You have to allow her to say, hey, my evil parents take my phone every night at 9 and won't have it back till the next morning. It is your job to be the evil parents. Now, when you inform your daughter that you attended a presentation by Dr. Leonard Sachs, and Dr. Sachs recommends that from now on you take her phone every night at 9 and give it back to her the next morning, she may not approve. She may protest. She may say, but I use it as my alarm clock. Remind her they still make actual alarm clocks. You can buy one at the store. They're not expensive. Now she gets really upset and she says, but what if there's an emergency? Remind her that you still have a landline, a house phone in the parent's bedroom. If there's true emergency, her friend is welcome to call, and you, the parent, will pick up the phone, and you, the parent, will decide whether this emergency warrants waking her up at 2 in the morning. It probably doesn't. It can probably wait. This has to be your job. No phones in the bedroom, no devices in the bedroom. That's not just my opinion. Those are the official guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And the link to the full text of the AAP guidelines is in your handout, where they say no unsupervised use of any device with internet access. There should be no expectation of privacy when a child is online. The phone or the device, laptop, tablet should be in a public space like the kitchen or the living room. So scholars define sexting as sending or receiving an obscene photo. They define obscene as the nipple of the female breast is exposed or the genitalia is exposed. Sexting is unusual, but what's very common is what some scholars call not quite sexting. So a girl taking a picture of herself in a swimsuit. That's become very common. Again, I want to remind you of the 2 Muslim psychiatrists who want you to know that girls are not exempt from this just because they are Muslim. A 12-year-old girl, very fine private school, 14-year-old boyfriend, he asked her to send him some photos, nothing raunchy. He just wanted to see her take off her blouse and skirt to reveal bra and panties. She went in her bedroom, closed the door, locked the door, knowing her parents would, of course, never approve, and sent the photos to him using Snapchat. Snapchat claims that if you send a photo using Snapchat and you set, say, a 5-second self-destruct, after the recipient has seen it for 5 seconds, it'll vanish. And if the recipient tries to save the photo by swiping to save it, you, the sender, will be notified. She believed that claim. Snapchat's lying. They're making a claim they know to be false. They know that there are dozens of free apps out there that allow you to save any photo sent by Snapchat without the sender being notified. She didn't know that. The boy, of course, had installed one of those apps. School administrators determined that he didn't intend for anyone else to see the photos, but he was at a party and he set his phone down and turned to grab some chips and talk to some friends. He was not. His back was to his phone. Another boy picked up the phone, found the photos, forwarded each of this girl's photos to his own phone, exited the gallery, went back to the home page. First boy didn't know anything had happened. Second boy then posted every one of this girl's photos on his own Instagram. Within 3 days, everyone had seen them. Boys this girl didn't even know were coming up to her and saying, hey, Emily, how about you put on a striptease for us? She had been invited to a ski trip. The parents who were hosting the trip, parents of the birthday girl who were paying for the bus to take the girls to the resort and lodging at the resort and lift tickets. The birthday girl called up this girl and said, I hate to make this phone call, but my mom's totally freaking out because all the other moms are freaking out and calling my mom and saying that they won't let their daughter come if you're going to be there because they now think you're some kind of bad influence. So I have to uninvite you. I'm really sorry. I have to uninvite you. This girl had no psychiatric history. She collapsed. Hysterical crying, saying her life was over. The photos would always be out there, which is true. They got this boy to take them down, but 20 other boys had picked them up, and I'm told they're still out there with this girl's true name years later. Started cutting herself with razor blades, saying she wanted to die. The parents took her to the psychiatrist. Psychiatrist prescribed Lexapro and arranged for counseling. That accomplished nothing. Now I have a 12-year-old girl with no psychiatric history, with depression, not responding to medication or psychotherapy. Who's at fault? The girl, her boyfriend, the other boy? No, they're kids. The parents are to blame. Look, this is a very grown-up device. With this device, I can take a photo and send a photo, and once I send that photo, I have no control over who sees it or what is done to that photo. That's a very grown-up functionality. If you're going to put a device like that in the hands of a child under 18, then you, the parent, are responsible. So I wrote an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal sharing this story and making this point, and I'm very specific in my guidance. Based on the evidence, no child under 13 should possess a smartphone. And if you're going to give a kid a smartphone, you must install parental monitoring app on the device and explain, if I see anything inappropriate, you lose the device indefinitely. Install an app. Some of the apps that I describe in your handout will show you every photo the kid takes as soon as they take it, before they even do anything with it. And you explain to the kid, if I see anything inappropriate, you lose the device indefinitely. Or just choose a basic phone, meaning a phone that can make a phone call, receive a phone call, but cannot surf the web, cannot share photos, cannot do social media. The two market leaders in the United States are the Pinwheel and the Gab, and I have no interest in getting into arguments about which is better. They're both fine. They are both basic phones. Again, these are listed in your handout. A basic phone is a good choice. But if you're going to give your kid a smartphone, you must install parental monitoring software. And American parents push back. One American parent told me, I don't want to violate my daughter's privacy. If she don't want me to see her photos, I'm fine with that. I won't see them. And I said to that mom, look, the most important thing you must teach your daughter is that there is no such thing as privacy to any photo that you share with a phone. Privacy is great. You want to share a photo privately? Here's what you do. You print it out on a piece of paper. You take it over to your friend, you show it to them, and you shred it. That's privacy. There is no privacy to any photo that you share electronically. You must install a parental monitoring app to prevent inappropriate use, to limit excessive time, limit exposure to popular culture. You've got to be the parent. Many American parents want to be their kid's best friend, but a friend is a peer. A friend cannot command. A friend cannot say, I will not allow you to pig out on ice cream right before supper. Only a parent can do that. A parent cannot say, a friend cannot say, I'm not going to allow you to listen to Cardi B's song about vaginal lubrication. A friend cannot say that. Only a parent can say that. Only a parent can take the device at 9 o'clock and turn it off. There's any number of kids out there who can be your kid's best friend, but they can't be the parent. That's your job. You must install parental monitoring software on your kids' devices and explain why. Effective parenting begins with the quality of the relationship you have with your child. You must take time to do fun things with your child. So let me tell you a story from my own practice. Mom and dad were divorced. Had been shared custody, but then dad got arrested and convicted for drug dealing, and he was incarcerated. And so mom got 100% custody. Dad got out, but he didn't get any custody because he was an ex-convict. And then mom got arrested and convicted, and the social worker brought the son to dad's house and said, mom's in jail. He's all yours now. If you don't want him, then he goes in to foster care. No relatives in the state. So he, of course, took custody of his son, and his son hated him, wanted nothing to do with him. Mom had been telling him for years what an evil person your father is. So that's a tough situation. You got sole custody of your son, and your son totally hates you. So dad said, guess what? We're going to Blue Mountain. We're going to go tubing. And son said, I don't want to go. I hate tubing. And dad said, you have never gone tubing. You don't know anything about it. And son said, well, I know I would hate it. I don't want to do it. And son said, that's too bad. We're going. And it's over an hour's drive up to Blue Mountain near Allentown. Son didn't talk the whole way. Dad told me. But then they got to the mountain. And son had never done this before, never gone up a mountain with snow on it and took a tube down. And he changed. That's how you change a kid's heart. Son learned that it was possible to have fun with dad. And once the fun is there, the relationship can be restored. And once the relationship is loving, then parenting is easy. You must prioritize time to have fun with your kid. So there's a chapter in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, about how you do that. It's titled Enjoy. Again, American parents are so confused on this. Yes, they spend time with their kids doing homework. That doesn't count. You've got to make time to do fun things with your kid. Homework does not count. Go tubing. That's what it looks like. Go tubing with your kid, or just take them to the park and do something fun, or bake cookies with them, or make music with them, or take your son skeet shooting, of which there's quite a few places in the greater Houston area to do that, or golfing, or just for a walk in the park. This photograph was taken at Galveston. It doesn't cost much to get in the car and drive to Galveston and just go for a walk on the beach. It costs very little. It's the cost of gas there and back again. And it's fun. It's fun. This is a photograph, a selfie my daughter and I took after we did a 20-mile bike ride on the Schuylkill River Trail near our home. And I'm dripping with sweat, and she's, of course, fine because she's in much better shape than I am. And before I included this photo, I checked to make sure, yes, there's lots of bike trails around Houston. So you can do this. You've got to find fun things to do with your kid. That's where the foundation of the relationship has to begin. Again, American parents are confused. They say, I just want her to be happy. I was an attending physician at Shady Grove Hospital in Rockville, Maryland for 18 years. And one night I got a phone call from the emergency room. They didn't want me to admit a patient or even to do a formal consultation. A 15-year-old girl was a victim of sexual assault. And the daughter was doing okay. She wasn't hysterical. The mom was hysterical. And the mom had asked that they call me in. She didn't know anyone in the ER. She wanted me to be there with her and her daughter. So I came in and came to the consultation room just adjacent to the ER. And I went into the consultation room with just mom and me. And the first thing she said to me, she said, I knew I shouldn't have let her go. I knew I should not have let her go. It was a frat party at the college. She's 15 years old. I knew I shouldn't have let her go. And of course, you want to shake mom and say, well, then why'd you let her go? But I didn't say that because I knew the answer. The answer was she wants to be her daughter's best friend. And a friend cannot command. A friend cannot say, you're not going. I spoke to parents in Tampa, Florida, and a mom there gave me a similar story, but a better example of parenting. This mom's daughter came to her one day and said, hey, guess what? We're all going to Cancun for spring break. And mom looked at her schedule and was like, I can't get away that week. I'm busy. And daughter said, I didn't say you're going. We're going. All the girls, we're going to Cancun for spring break. And mom said, but Cancun, that's where college men from the United States go for spring break. And you're 14, but you could easily pass for 18. I don't think some drunk young college man is going to ask for ID. I don't think it's safe. And her daughter said, oh, it's totally fine. It's totally safe. We'll have our phones. We'll stay together. It's totally safe. And mom said, no, I'm sorry. It's not safe. You're not going. And she told me her daughter exploded and started screaming at her, saying, I hate you. I hate you. You're going to like totally ruin my whole life. And mom said, well, to be honest, sometimes I'm not so fond of you either. She said, but I am your mother. And that's a job. Like any job, it has a job description. And item 1 in my job description is I have to keep you safe. And I know more than you do about the behavior of drunk young men. And you are not going. if you're doing the right thing as a parent, there will be times that your son or daughter get very angry at you, and they may say very hurtful things. It's part of your job to be a parent. What do kids need to fulfill their potential? So 440 years ago, a French aristocrat wrote to another aristocrat and said, "You must bring your son up roughly and dangerously on a fractious horse against a tough opponent, sword in hand. Harden him to sweltering heat and to cold, to wind and sun, and such dangers as he must learn to treat with contempt. He must experience hunger and exhaustion and loneliness. There is no other prescription." We tend to chuckle when we read things like that because science has proven, right, that bad outcomes, trauma of any kind in childhood and adolescence will lead to bad outcomes in adulthood. Is that true? So Robert Yerkes, professor at Harvard, and his student John Dodson were the first over 100 years ago to, that's not my arrows incidentally, to publish a quantitative report on the relationship between stress and performance. Zero stress, not much performance. Moderate stress, optimal performance. Too much stress, poor performance. That relationship, called variously the Yerkes-Dodson law, the Yerkes-Dodson curve, is arguably among the most validated relationships in human psychology. It has been shown to be true in sports at every level, from kindergarten through the professional leagues, in commercial sales, in military combat, and academic test taking. That's basically what it looks like. That graph is in your handout. When I was a graduate student at Penn, two of my fellow graduate students, Joe Vopicelli and Madeline Vizentainer, did a study with Marty Seligman in which rats were injected with a malignant tumor and then were randomly assigned to one of three conditions. One condition, they just put the rats back in the cage and didn't do anything further, just fed and watered them. Condition 2 and 3, rats were paired with one another, and they were put in a large cage on either side of an opaque barrier, sharing the same wire mesh floor. Large cage, one wire mesh floor, divided down the middle with an opaque barrier. On each side of the cage, there is a lever. And then at unpredictable intervals, the floor of the cage is shocked. It's a 9-volt battery. It's not a dangerous shot. It's a tingle. Rats don't like that tingle. They don't like that 9-volt tingle in the floor. And they get all frantic, and they each have a lever. One of the levers, when you press it, will immediately turn off the shock. The other lever does nothing. Well, the rat with the lever that turns off the shock very quickly figures out this lever turns off the shock. Rats figure that out very fast. And then that rat just parks himself next to that lever. Shock comes on, bam, I got this, I got this. Shock comes on, bam, he swipes it. The rat on the other side of the barrier, same wire mesh floor, experiencing exactly the same shock, but no control over the shock. Doesn't know why it comes on, doesn't know why it goes off. Same exact shock. When the rat hits the lever, the shock turns off to both sides of the cage. Both rats are experiencing the same shock. The rat who has control, Madeline called the master rat, because they're in control of the shock. The rat on the other side of the barrier, whose lever does nothing, she calls the helpless rat. One session with this experience, then you put all the rats back in their cages and just feed them and water them and wait. Condition 1, the rats that never experienced the shock, 54% rejected the tumor. Condition 3, the helpless rats, exposed to shocks over which they had no control, 27% rejected the tumor, exactly half as many. That's not a surprising finding. By the time they did this study, Marty Seligman had done many variations on this, showing that learned helplessness suppresses the immune system, makes you more vulnerable to disease and tumors and cancer. But the master rats not only did much better than the helpless rats, they actually did better than the rats who never saw the shock at all. 63% rejected the tumor. And just realize how elegant this study is. The only variable is a psychological variable, the perception of control. Because the master rats and the helpless rats experience the exact same shock. That's one session lasting less than 2 hours. Had that kind of life or death consequence. The right kind of stress is actually better than no stress. Yerkes Dodson curve. The right kind of stress is better than no stress at all. It is common to find American parents today who think that our job is to protect our kids from all stress, trauma, and disappointment. And the result is not stronger kids, but weaker kids. So I spoke at a school in Sydney where the headmaster liked to say to new parents, he would say, I hope your son will be profoundly disappointed during his time at this school. And parents would say, why would you hope that? And he'd say, if your son does not experience disappointment at this school, he will be unprepared for it when it comes in life, and it will surely come. To be successful in life, you must be willing to move from failure in one realm to failure in another realm with no loss of enthusiasm. The key to resilience is humility. And many Americans misunderstand humility. American culture is all about walking tall and standing proud. I was meeting with middle school kids at a school this a couple of years ago. And I said to them, what is humility? Raise your hand if you think you know what the word humility means. And a boy raised his hand and he said, humility means trying to convince yourself you're dumb when you know you're smart. I said, actually, that's not humility. That is psychosis, okay? That's a detachment from reality. I don't blame this kid. How should he know if he has received no instruction? He's an American kid living in the United States. He's immersed in the culture of Justin Bieber, shown here, who had a big hit song. This is quoting from Justin Bieber's big hit. I was born to be somebody. I'll light up the sky like lightning, and this world will belong to me. This world will belong to me. That's characteristic of American culture. It's all about me and how great I am. How's he supposed to learn about humility? So I was talking to parents and I said, you got to teach your kids to be humble. And mom, during Q&A, mom said, I don't want my daughter to be humble. I want her to have high self-esteem. So when that big job comes along, she'll go for it. I don't want her to be humble. I said, Mom, with all respect, you are confused. You're confusing being humble with being timid. Those are not synonyms. They're almost opposites. And the virtue you want for your daughter is not self-esteem. The virtue you're thinking of is courage. Courage means that you know your weaknesses, your failures, your inadequacies, and you find the strength to push forward nevertheless. How do you teach humility? Again, I devote a chapter in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, to my answer to that, but one very simple strategy is chores, household chores. And again, American parents will commonly say, oh, my kid's really busy. She's got school and computer coding class after school and soccer on top of that. Oh, she's so busy. You know, her job is school. You know, we don't expect her to tidy up the house. You know, her job is school. The unintended message those parents are sending is you are too important to be bothered with menial tasks. You're not teaching humility. You're teaching just the opposite. And so I was visiting an American elementary school. And the assignment, the third grade class assignment, was to write your name on a white piece of paper and then attach to your name 5 adjectives describing how amazing you are. And Mateo here has written a genius, misspelled, excellent, misspelled, talented, awesome, and marvelous. I'm not picking on Mateo. He's just doing the assignment. There's no awareness on the part of the teachers or the school leadership how puffing up self-esteem leads to narcissism and to resentment. And again, we now know from longitudinal cohort studies, that the kid with the highest self-esteem at age 15 is the kid who is most likely to be narcissistic, and the kid who's 10 years down the road is most likely to be resentful. Because if I'm so great, how come at age 25, I'm working so hard for not much money? Researchers at UCLA looked at the most popular TV shows promoted for children and teens in this country from 1967 through 2007. And they find great consistency. for the first 30 years there. From 1967 through 1997, they find that American television shows were always teaching what's most important. It's to do the right thing, to be a good friend, to stand up for the truth even when it hurts. Being famous, that was number 15 or number 16 out of 16 for those 30 years. But then between 1997 and 2007, American culture flipped upside down. And suddenly in 2007, it was all about being famous. In shows like Survivor, American Idol, iCarly, it's all about being famous. Doing the right thing, that's going to get you voted off the island. And other studies suggest it's only gotten worse since 2007. 1967 through 1997, what was the Andy Griffith Show in 1967, Happy Days in 1977, Family Ties in 1987, or Sabrina the Teenage Witch in 1997. Being famous was not at all important. Doing the right thing was the most important thing. But from 2007 onward, being famous suddenly is the most important thing. And they actually refer to what they call the new cult of fame and wealth. They say that American popular culture is now a cult of fame and wealth. That didn't originate with Justin Bieber or Bruno Mars, but they celebrate it, they promote it. There's Bruno Mars in one of his videos. He wants you to know that he has his own private jet and how great that is. The flip side, the dark side, is that if you're not rich and famous, then you are a loser. That is the message of contemporary American culture. You know, what really matters? What should we be doing? Again, we've got good cohort studies now that can answer that question, where you follow kids from children through adolescence and into adulthood. What characteristic in a child best predicts good outcomes? What grades you get doesn't predict it. Virtue and character, self-control predicts good outcomes 20 years down the road. So low self-control at 12 years of age predicts a high risk of poor health 20 years down the road. High self-control at 12 years of age predicts a low risk of poor physical health 20 years down the road. Low self-control at 12 years of age predicts a high risk of financial struggles 20 years down the road. High self-control at age 12 predicts a low risk of financial struggles 20 years down the road. Low self-control at age 12 predicts a low credit rating 20 years down the road. High self-control at age 12, high credit rating 20 years down the road. What should our first priority be? It should be to teach virtue and character. That's not a sermon, it's a robust empirical finding. For my book, The Collapse of Parenting, I devoted 2 chapters to reviewing every relevant cohort study. And every one of these longitudinal cohort studies comes to the same conclusion. Virtue and character predicts good outcomes. And the funny thing is that American parents used to teach that. As recently as 20 years ago, American parents would say things like, hey, I'd rather you get a C on the test honestly than cheat and get an A. But now it's common to find parents who say, hey, you want to get into UT Austin, you got to have amazing grades. And there's been an explosion in cheating over the last 20 years. When I ask parents, what's the most important of those 5 parameters? No American parent says school grades are the most important thing, but they act as if it is. They act as if getting good marks in school is more important than anything else. What parameter measured at 12 years of age best predicts, powerfully and accurately predicts, health and wealth and happiness? 20 years later, at age 32, it is self-control and other measures of conscientiousness. Psychologists have known for many years that every human personality can be mapped on a 5-dimensional scale. The 5 dimensions of human personality, the big 5, are conscientiousness and the subtraits of self-control and honesty, openness to new ideas, friendliness and agreeableness, emotional stability, and extroversion, introversion. Some personality traits are difficult to change, and personality does become more fixed as we age, but even young adults can change significantly on some traits like self-control and honesty. So that's your job, to teach virtue. But that requires that you teach from a position of authority. If you're talking to your kid about not cheating on a test and you say, you know, I personally wouldn't cheat because that's just not my thing, but you know, you do you, whatever floats your boat. You're not teaching anything. I've been a medical doctor in the United States for more than 34 years. I have witnessed firsthand what I've come to call the collapse of American parenting. As recently as 20 years ago, it was common to hear from American parents who would teach their kids, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Over the last 20 years, I've seen that command soften, morph into a question. And the question is something like, well, you know, how would you feel if someone did that to you? And the parent has no idea what to say when their son says, if someone did that to me, I'd kick him in the nuts and then I'd sit on his face. So Jennifer Boylan, regular columnist for the New York Times, wrote a column about enlightened parenting in which she claimed that enlightened parenting means, and I'm quoting now, setting your child free to discover for themselves their own right and wrong, and if in so doing your child becomes a stranger to you, then so be it. That may seem enlightened, but it is not enlightened. It is a dereliction of duty. If you set your kid free to discover for themselves their own right and wrong, what they'll discover is Bruno Mars and WAP and mainstream pornography. Look, what is childhood for? A 4-year-old horse is a mature adult. A 4-year-old child has barely begun. It can't be about physical maturity. A horse is a bigger animal than a human. Why? Humans are developing children and adolescents for more years than most animals live. Why? We don't have to guess. We have scholars like Dr. Melvin Conrad Emery, who's devoted his career to answering that question. And the answer the scholars give is that it takes many years for parents to teach the child right and wrong. The New York Times recommendation that you set your child loose to discover their own right and wrong is not only an abdication of parental responsibility, it's profoundly unhuman. It's not what our DNA has geared us to do. I took this photograph in Times Square. Live for now, Pepsi's slogan. Don't worry about the sugar, live for now. Whatever floats your boat, live for now. If it feels good, do it. The real hazard of contemporary American culture right now, the culture of if it feels good, do it, is that it undermines self-control, overvalues fame and wealth, disrespects parental authority. So what do you do about it? Well, you must strengthen the bond between parent and child, and that starts with supper. Frank Algar and his colleagues interviewed more than 10,000 adolescents coast to coast and asked them, in the last 7 days, how many evening meals have you had at home with at least one parent? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And then for each of these 10,000 plus adolescents, quantified internalizing problems like hitting the wall in anger, internalizing problems like anxiety and depression, externalizing problems like hitting the wall in anger, positive well-being, pro-social behavior, and life satisfaction, and found a huge effect going from 0 to 7, but not just from 0 to 7, at almost every step along the way. Let's compare 5 evening meals at home with a parent to 6 evening meals at home with a parent. Going from 5 to 6, we see a significant decrease in internalizing problems, a significant decrease in externalizing problems, a significant increase in well-being and life satisfaction. And yet what has happened? In 1992, researchers asked teenagers, in the last 24 hours, have you had a meal at home with a parent? In 1992, 2/3 of teenagers said, yes, I have. In 2005, 2/3 of teenagers said, no, I have not. And other research suggests it's only gotten worse since then. You must fight for dinner at home. So my wife and I went to buy a new car, and when the salesman found out we had a teenage daughter, he was very excited, wanted us to sell us the rear seat entertainment system, and handed us this flyer. Let's take a look. The 2 kids are wearing headphones, looking at a screen. Mom is looking back at her kids, smiling as if to say, hey, this is great. We can drive to Dallas, never have to talk to my kids at all. What are we thinking? Everyone's busy. Time is precious. Time in the car is special. It's private time. When you're in the car, you should be listening to your daughter, and she should be listening to you, not to Bruno Mars or Cardi B. No earbuds, no headphones in the car. So again, UCLA researchers followed American families, middle income and affluent families. Mother, father, son, and daughter return home, and within minutes, they find each family member is in a different room looking at a different screen. You can't have a family life if the family is not together. No TV in the bedroom, no screens in the bedroom, nothing in the bedroom except a bed. The TV should be in a common room. I want you to know I practice what I preach. That's our home. 12 and a half years ago, my wife and I recruited her parents to move in with us. My parents are both dead. So there's our TV. There's my father-in-law with his back to the fire, my mother-in-law, my wife, my daughter. One TV, one TV. We've got a big backyard. We grow peppers, tomatoes, more tomatoes, carrots, board games. That's our group selfie. It doesn't cost anything to do this. American parents are confused. They think they have to choose between being the tiger mom pushing their kid to achieve and the Irish setter dad who just wants kids to do whatever they want. But both are mistaken. Last chapter of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, is titled The Meaning of Life. You've got to give your kid your understanding of the big picture. Why are we here? What's it all about? And it better be an answer better than going to Stanford or earning a lot of money, because that answer will not satisfy. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. Because if you don't have that big picture, then working hard to get a good grade just becomes a race to nowhere, to borrow the title of a documentary making that point. And the result is anxiety, depression, and disengagement. But you can't be the Irish setter dad just letting kids do whatever they want if you have not first educated desire. As researchers find, if you let American teens do whatever they want, what boys most want is video games. What girls most want is social media. You've got to instill a longing for something better and deeper than social media and video games. So we began with the question, why are American kids today so much more likely to be anxious or depressed compared with American kids 10 or 20 years ago? And what can we do about it? My answer is the bonds across generations have been broken. You must restore them. Same-age peer relations have displaced the parent-child relationship. You must correct that. You must prioritize the family, cancel the play date, make a family date instead. Parents have allowed screens to displace real-world experience. You must change that. You must limit, govern, and guide your kids' use of social media and video games. American culture now prioritizes fame and wealth over virtue and character. You must challenge that. You and I can't change Hollywood. But you must teach your child that self-control and honesty are more important than being rich and famous. Many kids now accept the contemporary American assumption that money will buy happiness. That's a lie. You must model the alternative, that humility and contentment lead to happiness. Again, you'll find more on these topics in my books, all of which are available as audiobooks shown here. Translations are available in these 8 languages. If you found this message useful and you know of another group that might be interested, please send me an email. I just very quickly want to say a word about some of the other presentations you might find of interest about Boys Adrift. Why Gender Matters. There's one version for parents, another version for teachers. The version for teachers, we talk about how you get boys excited about creative writing and expository writing and Jane Eyre and Jane Austen. Again, based on what I've learned from visiting over 460 schools over 20 years, how you get girls excited about computer science and physics and engineering. The great disappointment when dreams don't come true. The handout is online. The link is mynameLeonardSachs.com/parenting.pdf. It is case sensitive. It is all lowercase, and you must include the www and the .pdf. My email is shown here. So it is now time for your questions. To post a question, you're going to click on the chat box and then type your question. Now, Hassan
we're doing it a bit differently, yes. Sorry.
Hassan had shared with me some of your questions, which I am, while you're typing in your questions and while Hassan and his colleagues are preparing and going through the questions that you have posted, I want to answer at least, I've got a bunch of these questions, but maybe just 1 or 2 I'll answer. So one question Hassan shared with me, what about a girl at a school where she's the odd one out? She's the only girl wearing a headscarf in middle school. Okay, well, it depends. Some girls thrive on the opportunity to be an ambassador for their faith, but other girls do not thrive. And that environment for those other girls is stressful, and they lose their voice. And that's not a good stress. We talked about good stress and bad stress in the study that Visentini, Vopicelli, and Seligman did. There's good stress and there's bad stress, but for some girls, that's not a good stress, and they will become anxious and withdrawn and quiet and lose their voice. That's not a good thing. If that's your daughter, if she is not thriving at that school, if she feels bullied or excluded or ostracized, then you should consider transferring her to a Muslim school. And it's all very well to say, well, you know, she should be an ambassador for her faith. That's fine for an adult, but children are not adults. And you have to respect what is age appropriate for your child. Not every child can be the fearless ambassador for the faith. You need to allow her to become strong, to find her voice. And there are many Islamic schools in the Houston area. And Sister Dahlia has offered, and we discussed this earlier today, and she gave me permission to share her name and her email address. If you would like advice about choosing an Islamic school, Sister Dahlia knows them, and she is ready to advise, because as she and I discussed, and as she and I agree, there's no such thing as the best school. The best school for Justin could be a disaster for Jacob. Every child's unique, and you need to know your child. Hassan, do you want me to go through some of your other questions, or do you want to break, and how do you want to proceed here?
Thank you, Mrs. Dahlia.
Keep going? Okay.
Okay,
All right.
Jazakallah khair. I think we are planning on breaking at 6:45, just for 5 minutes. Or Hassan, do you want us to break now?
It's up to you. We can do the trivia now and get it done now and then, or later. It's up to you.
right.
So we could actually, it's up to you, Dr. Sachs.
Let me do one more question, because
Okay, sounds great.
Hassan shared with me that many parents want to know, how do I convince my child that there should be limits on social media? How do I convince my child that there should be limits on what video games are played? How do I convince my child he's got to eat some vegetables? That's a good question. So Diana Baumrind, I'm always quoting Diana Baumrind. She really created the field of research on parenting styles. And she and her colleagues followed the same families for more than 30 years. And they literally went into the house when the kid is 5 and 7 and 10 and watch, how are the parents parenting? And then they follow this kid. So this kid was 5 years old when the study began. They follow him till he's 35 years old. So they see, what are the results of different parenting styles long-term? And she's the one who came up with the notion that there are 3 basic parenting styles, which she called authoritarian, permissive, and authoritative. Instead of using those big words, I like to use too hard, too soft, and just right. What she found is that parents who are too hard, who are always punishing, always reprimanding, using corporal punishment, rarely expressing love or affection, those kids don't do well. Those kids, when they grow up, are more likely to be convicted of a violent crime. They are often unstable in relationships, unable to sustain romantic relationships, bad outcomes. You don't want to be too hard, but you don't want to be too soft. They're permissive parent. Kids who are raised by permissive parents who are like, hey, I love you. Anything you do is fine. You make the call. Those kids don't do well either. Different outcomes. They are more likely to be convicted of nonviolent crimes like traffic offenses, running a red light. They are much more likely to become addicted to drugs or alcohol. They have never learned that there are limits, and you must respect those limits. The kids who do best are kids who have authoritative, just right parents, who set limits, but who are loving. And she loved to say, especially toward the end of her life, she loved to say that American parents think you have to choose between being strict and loving, when she said the research shows clearly that the best parents are both strict and loving. Best parents set rules and explain the rules, but they enforce those rules. Occasionally will bend a rule, but the rules are enforced, but they are loving parents, and they have fun with their kids. She herself, in the last years of her life, she said American parenting is drifting towards permissive. It's becoming more permissive. In the 50s, it was too harsh, too hard. Now it's too soft. And American parents don't know this. They don't realize that they are being too permissive because all the other parents are permissive along with them. The original title of my book, The Collapse of Parenting, was The Collapse of American Parenting. And the subtitle was Why Most Kids Would Now Be Better Off Raised Outside the United States. Well, non-celebrity authors don't get to choose their own title. So that's not the title of the book. But that's the title that I submitted. To be a just right parent, you will need courage because you're going to have to do things differently than your neighbor. In the original manuscript, I actually had an epilogue. When is it time to move to New Zealand? Because the South Island of New Zealand, where I've visited and spoke, along with Scotland, along with German-speaking Switzerland, those are really good places to raise kids where there's strong bonds, and everyone expects you to have strong bonds and for kids to listen to their parents. Not in this country. Well, you and I are not moving to New Zealand. So how do you do it here? You will need courage. And when you set these limits, your son or daughter may say, none of the other parents are doing that. And they may be absolutely right. And you'll have to say, I'm not their parent. I'm your parent. Because most of your neighbors are too permissive if they're American parents. So anyhow, it's 6:45. So Hassan, Dalia, what's next?
So what we were looking at 3 of the questions of MCQ, but I think that with so much knowledge we're getting from you, maybe we should continue with your questions and then do the 6 questions for the prizes at the end. But we'd love to hear what you think, which one you want us to do.
Well, I'd love to do at least one more question. Again, following up on the question that Hassan shared, many parents who submitted questions of the form, how do I convince my child X? So let's just look at one of those. How do I convince my child that he has to eat some vegetables? So I was speaking to parents at Horace Greeley High School in Chappaqua, New York. Chappaqua is an affluent suburb of New York City. And husband and wife shared with me how they had made a healthy and nutritious supper for their son and daughter. And son and daughter came home, they said, yuck, we don't want to eat that. We just want pizza. And so dad sat down at his computer, went to the Domino's pizza website and ordered pizza to be delivered to the home, took one order for his son. The son got one pizza, daughter got another pizza. And I said to dad, why'd you do that? Why didn't you just tell him this is what's for supper? And dad said, well, I don't believe in using starvation as a means of discipline. I said, they're not going to starve. Look, 30 years ago, if mom made a healthy and nutritious supper and son and daughter didn't like it, she did not run out and buy them a pizza. She would say, this is what's for supper. If you don't like it, then you can go to bed hungry. There has been an explosion in obesity among kids raised in the United States. In 1971, 4% of American kids were obese. Today, more than 18% of American kids are obese. That's more than a quadrupling. There are 3 factors driving the explosion in obesity among American kids, which I explore in some detail. All of chapter 2 of The Collapse of Parenting is devoted to the question, why so many fat kids in this country? But one of those factors is that parents have abandoned authority. 30 years ago, 50 years ago, parents told their kids what's for supper. Now, many American parents ask their kids what the kid wants for supper. And the problem is kids are not competent. Well, most kids aren't. I mean, there are some kids, when you ask them, what do you want for supper? They'll say broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, spinach, asparagus, and kale. But many American kids will say pizza, French fries, potato chips, and ice cream. Many kids are not competent to choose what's for supper. That's why they have parents. And when parents abandon their authority and let kids decide, kids suffer. So my answer is, you don't try to negotiate. Okay, so I was at a restaurant, and the family next to us, there was a mother, a father, and what looked to be like a 5-year-old. And the mother and father were basically bribing their kid and saying, if you just eat 3 spoonfuls of green peas, promise we'll go to Dairy Queen and you can have anything you want. These are parents teaching their 5-year-old that the 5-year-old is in charge. And it's a parent's job to bribe their kid to eat 3 spoonfuls of green peas. Don't do that. Don't do that. Explain, but don't negotiate. Explain, look, this is what you need to be healthy. If you live on French fries, potato chips, and ice cream, you will be unhealthy. You must eat vegetables first. And if you don't want to eat your vegetables, that's fine, but you're not going to have ice cream for dessert if you don't eat your vegetables. I grew up in this country. I can tell you that 30 years ago, every American parent said that. Today, very few American parents say that, and that is one factor driving the explosion in obesity among American kids. Explain, but don't negotiate. Again, you'll find much more on this point, including a defense of the claim I've just made, that this is indeed driving the rise in obesity. That's not a guess. We have good research documenting that claim, which you will find in chapter 2 of my book. So, Dalia, did we want to switch to your questions?
Thank you so much. We actually got a request to stop for Maghrib Saleh on the West Coast. So, because of course there is difference in time. So maybe we can use just maybe 5 to 6 minutes or whatever for a few questions and then continue if that's okay with you. I think
Sure.
the questions we're talking about here are the multiple choice questions with the prizes. Again, I'm gonna get your feedback and Hassan's feedback on that because I don't know if we should be kind of doing that while our brothers and sisters on the West Coast are praying.
Okay.
Hassan, what do you think?
If you're taking a 5 minute break, yeah, let's just take a 5 minute break. It's fine. Dr.
Okay,
Sachs.
let's do that, inshallah. This way we do not kind of take away from their, they have to pray like we had to pray. So we'll do that and we will resume, inshallah. Hassan, if you don't mind, if you could just put your slide up, that was beautiful. And then when we come back, Dr. Sachs, if you'd like to go on with do you have any more questions on your slides?
I have one more, yes.
Then we'll finish all your questions first, and then we'll start posing some of the new questions, inshallah.
Very good.
Awesome. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How's everyone? Again, thank you everybody for staying around with us. At this point, we will continue with Dr. Leonard Sachs. He's going to be telling us I think the last question or a couple of questions he has. Dr. Sachs, please start. Please unmute yourself.
Okay.
You're unmuted.
Okay. I was looking through the questions that people have posted online, and I saw that several have asked about Roblox. So I just wanted to say a word about Roblox because I do think it's important, as I'll explain. So the most popular video games for American boys that I mentioned earlier, those are for boys age 13 and older. But the most popular game for American kids 9 to 12 years of age is Roblox. And 3/4 of American kids 9 to 12 years of age are now on Roblox. And the number of hours spent on Roblox in July was double what it was in February. So the pandemic has driven a doubling in the amount of hours that kids, elementary school kids, are spending on Roblox. So Roblox is not really a game, it's a game platform. There's over 40 million games on Roblox you can choose from, more than 30,000 new games being uploaded every day. You can solve puzzles, you can explore a haunted castle, you can chat with strangers, you can adopt a pet, you can whack pigs with baseball bats, you can engage in simulated sex or in violent combat. So this is the review that you'll find at Common Sense Media for Roblox, and they recommend that no kid under 14 should be on Roblox, and I think that's right. Now, in reality, if you know kids, you know that no 14-year-old wants to be on Roblox because they regard it as a platform for 9-year-olds. But it is not appropriate for your 9-year-old or 12-year-old to be on Roblox. You cannot possibly know all 40 million games available on Roblox, and the parental monitoring app will not distinguish reliably among them. So you really need to simply block Roblox. And again, it's very easy to have your parental monitoring app do that. Let me stop this share and go back to the other question that Hassan had shared with me. So again, Hassan shared with me a number of parents registering for this workshop talked about angry kids, kids who are angry. And kids are angry for different reasons. And again, we could spend hours just talking about why kids are angry and how to deal with that anger. I just want to start with one such angry kid. I've had many experiences with teenage boys like this. And parents says, my son just always seems so angry. He just wants to stay in his room, playing his video game. And when you try to limit his time, he gets really angry. He'll hit the wall in anger. He doesn't even want to eat supper with us. He hates us. If we insisted he'd come out and join us for supper, he's angry like we have asked for something totally unreasonable, and he won't say a word and just sits at the table. What do? Half measures will not work. That's not a guess. I've seen firsthand. Okay, you need to sit down with your kid and explain, we've been doing some things wrong. No more video game console in the bedroom. Look, the video game guidelines that I applied earlier, about 40 minutes a night on school nights and an hour a day on weekends, that applies for kids who are not addicts. I know a lot about counseling addicts. It was something I studied as a graduate student in psychology, and I've counseled many addicts over my 34 years. What defines an addiction? It's not about how much you use. It's loss of control, loss of control. So an alcoholic goes to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. He'll say, my name's Steve. It's 12 years and 5 months since my last drink, and I am an alcoholic. He doesn't say I used to be an alcoholic. even though it's more than 12 years since his last drink. He says, I am an alcoholic, because he knows if he has one drink, he may lose control and get drunk. The video game guidelines apply only to boys who are not addicts. How do you know if your son's an addict? So your son has a test tomorrow, and he wants to do well on the test. But he still likes Fortnite. It's not even his favorite game anymore, but he still likes Fortnite. So he figures, hey, a round of Fortnite Battle Royale takes 20 minutes start to finish. It's 9 o'clock. I'll play one round, be in bed by 9:30. At 3 a.m., he's still playing. And when you, the parent, go in to say, hey, we got to turn the device off and go to bed, he gets angry and starts yelling. That's an addict. Loss of control. The only intervention that is reliably effective for an addict is complete abstinence. You have to remove the video game console from the home. No more video games, period. And if he's going to a friend's house, you have to call and see, is there going to be access to video games there? Okay, I'm sorry, he can't go. Just as if you were married to a man who was an alcoholic, you would not take him to a party where drinks are served. And nor should he go to such a party. You have to abstain. Both parents must stand their ground, because this boy will play one parent off the other. If both parents stand their ground, then you will see a change. Not after a day, not after a week. That first day and week, your son is going to be angry and silent. But if both parents stand their ground, in 6 weeks, you'll have a boy with better self-control, a boy who's discovering other things to do with his free time besides playing video games. Now, I share such a story at length in my book, The Collapse of Parenting, and where I advise the parents absolutely no video games. He's an addict. And he changed. He became himself again. He became more fluent, more engaging, more friendly. But he still insisted that he wanted to play video games and that he didn't think video games were harmful for him. He had no insight. He still had no insight into the fact that he was a video game addict. But if both parents stand their ground, in 6 weeks, you'll have a different child. Don't expect him to agree with your intervention. He may or may not, but at least you'll have a family. At least you'll be doing things together as a family. Again, that principle goes for much of what I've said this evening. If your kid likes having a phone in the bedroom, a video game console in the bedroom, social media, sit down with your kids, say, hey, we've been doing some things wrong. We're going to make some changes. There may be an explosion. And the older the child, the longer and louder the explosion will last. And it may last for days or even weeks. But if both parents stand their ground, after 6 weeks, you will have a child with better self-control. And you will be on your way to having a healthier family. So that's all that I have prepared. Just going to put up the screen with the email on it. Hassan, Dalia, I'm turning it over to you for Q&A.
Thank you so much. So what we're going to do right now, inshallah, is Hassan is going to go ahead and post some questions on the, Hassan and Bueni are going to be posting some questions on the chat. I will read those questions and we will ask Dr. Sachs to answer them, inshallah. So Hassan?
I posted one. Go for it.
Okay, Jazakallah khair. What is the process to wean kids off these destructive video games? Many of them will fight hard against their parents' desire to take away these games.
So I began to answer that question just now. The idea of weaning off doesn't work. It doesn't work for any addiction. It certainly doesn't work for video games. Now, if your kid is not an addict, then you can adopt the guidelines that I shared earlier, 40 minutes a night on school nights, an hour a day on weekends, and your minutes do not roll over. I was scrolling through the questions myself a minute ago, and someone had said, if they don't play any video games for 3 weeks, can they play unlimited on the weekend? No, they can't. That's binge gaming, and it's harmful because it enforces bad habits. Look, there's lots of things that kids can do with their free time. They can, I've talked to other Muslim groups, they can memorize the Quran, they can read a book, they can study a musical instrument, they can shoot baskets, they can practice a sport. There's so many better ways for kids to spend their time than playing video games. Let me give you, though, another objection that we're encountering increasingly often, and that is the boy will say, video games are my job. So not far from my home in a suburb of Philadelphia, a 16-year-old boy won the Fortnite World Championship, which came with a $3 million payout. And predictably enough, other boys are saying, hey, this is my job. I'm going for that $3 million, you know? And the boy will say, hey, if I wanted to be a professional football player and I was spending every free minute working on fitness and throwing the football, you wouldn't criticize me. Well, I want to be a professional gamer. So, you know, I need more than 40 minutes a night. You can barely get started. So I actually spoke to UC Irvine, the University of California, Irvine, is one of a growing number of American universities that has a video game team. And they go and play other colleges. And they give scholarships. You can get a scholarship to UC Irvine to play video games. And I talked to the coach about how does he deal with that boy who says, hey, you know, I don't care about my grades. I'm going to be a professional gamer. I'm going to earn the big money playing video games. I don't need to worry about grades. And the coach said he's got a whole team of professionals that work with him to follow each of these gamers and make sure that they are doing their homework and that they're getting good marks at school. Because he said, look at the odds. Look at the odds. What are the odds that you're going to make any kind of money playing video games? It's on the order of 1 in a million. And that's true for these gamers. The odds are very, very long. And you might have heard my remark earlier this evening. I said you'd be better off trying to play in the National Football League. I wrote an article for the New York Times, and the link is in your handout. The article is titled, "But Mom, Video Games Are My Job." And if you just look for that in your handout, you'll see the link. And I calculate the odds. What are the odds of playing in the National Football League if you're a teenage boy? And what are the odds of making any kind of money, any kind of good money as a professional video gamer? The odds are much better playing in the National Football League. There are millions and millions of people trying to make money playing video games, and many of them, most of them, are pretty good. The odds that you're going to be better than them are very long indeed. And furthermore, we know that that career doesn't last long at all, on the order of 1 to 2 years at the top, and then you go down, unless you can achieve celebrity status in some other way and monetize that as a gamer. So if your son is not an addict, he can play video games not more than 40 minutes a night, not more than an hour a day on weekends, and no violent games. Those are the rules based in the evidence. If your son is an addict, he can't stop, loss of control, then he can't play video games.
Our next question is, how do we handle environment where one parent is disrespectful and emotionally abusive to one child and the older child, and the older child also has to help out with the younger sibling while both parents work? The older sibling is the one who is emotionally being put down.
I always dread that question because I don't have a good answer. If the two parents are not on the same wavelength, We now are in a different domain. We're no longer talking about parenting. We're talking about marriage counseling. And I do some marriage counseling. And let me tell you how I approach that situation as a counselor. I bring in both parents and I say, don't talk to each other because you don't agree on this. Just talk to me. When two parents don't agree, conversations become debates. A debate, when I'm debating and I'm listening to my opponent, I'm just listening for holes in their argument where I can show that I'm right and they're wrong. I'm not really listening as a loving family member, as a loving family member would listen. I'm listening as a debater. Debate is adversarial. I'm trying to show that you're wrong and I'm right. When a conversation becomes a debate, you're done. You're not going to persuade them. They're not going to persuade you. You're just shouting at each other. That's where a good counselor can help. So I bring the two parents in and I say, don't talk to each other. Talk to me. Mom, you get 3 minutes. Dad, no talking. Okay, Mom, let's hear. What are your thoughts about this issue? Let's hear. And I'm just looking at Mom, and if Dad tries to speak, I hush him up. Okay, thank you very much, Mom. Now, Dad, let's hear your perspective. What do you think? Mom, you got to wait. He's got his 3 minutes. By structuring the visit that way, and we could talk about whether 3 minutes or 4 minutes or 5 minutes is best, but the point is one parent gets to talk without being interrupted and without looking at the other parent. They're looking at me. It allows us to become a conversation rather than a debate. Instead of just trying to think, how can I shoot down the other person's argument? Because you're not allowed to talk for a few minutes. You can start to listen. You can start to appreciate the other person's perspective. In marriage counseling, getting one parent to admit, yes, you're wrong, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm a bad person, you were right all along, that's not going to happen. You've got to try and come to a common ground. So again, I can't really speak to that particular situation without hearing the other parent's point of view. Whenever two parents disagree, I like to get the two parents in front of me and let each of them talk. Never do this in front of your child. Never argue in front of your child. And I tell you, I practice what I preach. And there have been numerous times that I've said to our daughter, I said, Sarah, you need to excuse us. Your mom and I are going to go have a chat. And we'll go off and talk, closed doors, quietly, and come to some agreement. Or if we cannot come to some agreement, we'll say, we'll talk about that later. Nothing undermines the parent-child relationship more than for parents to attack one another in front of their child. Don't ever do that. That's about all I have. It's not very much. I know, I'm sorry.
No, that was beautiful. Thank you. We understand that there are no magical answers to some questions, but you handled it beautifully. The next question, are there any socioeconomic factors that directly impact some of the topics you have mentioned, such as social media or video games? And a sub-question to that is, how can social media be used more positively in raising children?
Okay. So 10 years ago, household income was huge. 10 years ago, affluent kids and middle income kids had phones. 10 years ago, low income kids didn't have a smartphone. Today they do. And again, we've got very good numbers on this. And ironically, low income kids are more likely to be on some of the social media than affluent kids are. And one reason for that is that, kids in River Oaks have, they can go boating, they can go sailing, they can play tennis, they have soccer. kids in Pasadena or South Houston may not have those things. And so they're playing video games because it might not even be that safe to go out on the street, and there's not a lot of tennis courts. And even if there was a tennis court nearby, this kid doesn't have a tennis racket. So household income matters a lot, but it is no longer the case as it was 10 years ago that low-income kids don't have a smartphone. They do. All the kids, the great majority of American kids now have access to devices. And I've done these presentations at Title I schools and for parents in low-income neighborhoods, as well as for parents in affluent neighborhoods. And the concerns are now pretty universal. Parents in every neighborhood, River Oaks and Pasadena equally, are concerned that their son would rather play video games than do well in school. There is no, so I've got a whole presentation on Boys Adrift where we look in detail at, well, if it's for school administrators, we'll look in detail at how household income influences academic achievement. The gender gap is robust. If anything, bigger in River Oaks than it is in Pasadena or South Houston. So across all households, we find that boys are now lagging behind girls with very few exceptions. The exceptions would be Korean, Chinese, Japanese kids. We don't find much of a gender gap in Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Thai, Bangladeshi kids. Boys in those families are more likely to work hard compared to white, black, or Latino boys, for example. So the digital divide that people used to write about 10 years ago, meaning that affluent kids had computers and smartphones while low-income kids did not, is no longer true with regard to smartphones. It's still true with regard to high-speed access. Very high-speed access is less often available in low-income households. But the basic outlines of what I've portrayed here, of kids being immersed in a toxic culture, is absolutely true for low-income kids as it is true for affluent kids. Ironically, low-income kids may have an advantage. So back in olden days, when I was a grad student back in the 80s, we learned that low-income kids were at greater risk of anxiety and depression than affluent kids are. And everyone just, I mean, there were so many studies that showed that back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And Sunaya Luthar, Luthar, in the early 2000s showed that's not true anymore. That affluent kids, especially affluent girls, are now more likely to be anxious or depressed compared to low-income girls. And that's, again, a flip comparable to the flip that I described with regard to the immigrant paradox. But now we're not talking about the immigrant paradox. We're talking about what you might call the household income paradox, namely that low-income kids, especially low-income girls, are now less likely to be anxious or depressed than affluent girls. Why is that? So Jean Twenge and her colleagues, I think, have come up with the answer, which is that in low-income neighborhoods, there's more likely to be bonds across generations. And I've seen this firsthand. In South Houston and Pasadena, girls are more likely to be hanging out with adult women on the front stoop. In River Oaks, teenage girls do not go shopping with their mom. They go shopping with other girls their own age. Some of those girls in River Oaks wouldn't be caught dead with their parents. And I've spoken at Kincaid and River Oaks Baptist School and other schools in that neighborhood. So yeah, household income matters, but it doesn't matter always in the way you think it might.
Thank you so much. This is an amazing response. I mean, I was like hearing this and I'm going like, wow, I had no idea. I'm so glad we're recording this.
Thank you.
This way I can listen to it again and take notes. Our next question, I'm very close to my 6-year-old daughter, but her friends have often had very strong influence on her, making it very difficult to easily change her mind if something becomes the thing they should do. Like, for example, putting makeup on. She's too young for that. She also has a very hard time stopping a game or stopping a phone call or whenever we pick her up from parties. What's the limit? What is the limit to enforce discipline on this age?
How old is this child?
6 years old.
6 years old. Using
Yes.
makeup?
Yes.
Okay, that's a problem. So a couple suggestions, and again, you'll find all of these in my book, The Collapse of Parenting. One thing, American parents use too many question marks. So parents at the playground with their 6-year-old and says, do you think we should go home soon? A 6-year-old takes that question very concretely as a question. Do I think we should go home soon? No, I don't think we should go home soon. And you're not accomplishing anything. What do you say to your 6-year-old? You say, we're leaving in 10 minutes. You make a statement, not a question. We're leaving in 10 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes later, you say, we're leaving in 5 minutes. 3 minutes later, you say, need to wrap up. We're leaving in 3 minutes. 1 minute, you say, okay, it's time to go. We're leaving in 1 minute. Make statements, not questions. 6-year-old girls should not be using makeup. Again, I wrote a book on this point called Girls on the Edge. Second edition came out a few months ago. 6-year-old girls should not be worried about whether they look pretty to other people. That is not age appropriate. Now, indeed, American culture is an immensely toxic culture for young girls that is constantly pushing them to judge themselves based on how they look in the eyes of other people. That's harmful. It's very harmful. And it is your job as the parent to make sure that doesn't happen. 6-year-old girls should not spend a lot of time looking in the mirror deciding whether they need more mascara. That is not age appropriate. And when girls start doing things that are not age appropriate, anxiety and depression are very likely to follow. That's not a guess. Again, I present that research at great length in my book, Girls on the Edge. Girls should not be using makeup. And if your daughter, 6 years old or 10 years old, is in a group of girls who are really obsessed with makeup, that's a big problem. She needs to find new friends. Those friends are harmful, and the peer group is very influential. And you may need to move. Because the next question parents often have is, my kid's fallen in with a bad group of kids. What do I do? Well, you try to establish connections with a better group of kids, girls who are not obsessed with makeup and looking cute in the eyes of the boys at a ridiculously early age. But if you can't do that, you may need to move. And I'm not asking you to do anything we didn't do. You may be wondering why such an old person as me has a 14-year-old daughter. The answer is my wife and I thought we were infertile. For the first 15 years of our marriage, we did not have a child. And then we got our one and only, Sarah, unexpectedly. And so now, as parents, we had, as parents who didn't expect to be parents, we had to decide, okay, where's our daughter going to go to school? And it didn't take us long to decide we were not happy with what was available in our neighborhood. And so I sold my practice in Montgomery County, Maryland. I left my job, found a new job, 4 hours northeast in Chester County, Pennsylvania. And we sold our home, which wasn't easy and took a very long time because we're talking about the crash of 2008, 2009 is when this happened. And moved to Chester County. Your child has to be your first priority. That's your job as a parent. And if your child needs you to move, then you have to quit your job and move. And I'll find other parents who will say, you know, Dr. Sachs, you talked about the importance of finding time to do fun stuff with your kid. I don't have time for that. You know, I work 60, 70 hours a week, And I do my best, but I do not have time to go tubing or go to the beach with my kid. I just don't have time. And what I say to that parent is, you're going to have to make a change. If you are currently in a situation where you have no time for your child, then the situation has to change. You may need to leave your job. You may need to move to a less expensive place to live. But your child has to be your top priority. You will not get these years back. And you must do whatever it takes to do what's best for your child.
Dr. Sachs, this was very powerful and is so true. Like we say, our children are our priority, but are we really doing that? Are we really bearing that in mind? I love your advice. The next question, some of our kids have lost their enthusiasm in life. They lost interest and passion to do things. They just seem to be lazy. We can't really get them to do anything. They have everything they need. What can we do about that?
All right, so there's two issues immediately come to mind. One is, if a child used to enjoy doing things and now doesn't, I do think that formal evaluation by a professional is appropriate, because that can be a sign of depression. But I will also warn you that in this country, in the United States, doctors overprescribe medication. And if you take a child in the United States to any professional in the United States, child psychiatrist, pediatrician, what have you, it's very likely that you're going to walk out with a prescription. And I hope you'll take a look at a chapter in The Collapse of Parenting titled, "Why Are So Many Kids on Medication?" American kids are 14 times more likely to be on medication for ADHD than kids in the United Kingdom. 40 times more likely to be on medications for bipolar disorder compared with kids in Germany. 93 times more likely to be on antipsychotic medications like Risperdal, Zyprexa, and Seroquel compared to kids in Italy. We're not talking about small factors here. We're talking about factors of 10 or greater. And none of this was true 30 years ago. 30 years ago, American kids were not more likely than kids elsewhere to be on medication. Now they are. So again, for documentation of that fact and an exploration of why that might be so, I refer you to that chapter in The Collapse of Parenting. Nevertheless, when a parent says to me, my child used to be interested in stuff and now they're not, we do need to do a formal evaluation to make sure that kid's not depressed. I just want you to be on your guard and don't let that doctor medicate your kid if your kid really is not depressed. Be courageous. Stand up to the doctor and say, I think my child's just being lazy. So again, as you know, I wrote a book called Boys Adrift. The 5 factors driving the growing epidemic of unmotivated boys and underachieving young men. We are seeing an explosion in the number of boys and young men who just aren't motivated. What do you do about that? How do you re-engage motivation and interest in the real world? Well, again, I'd hope you take a look at the book, Boys Adrift. You need to understand what's undermining motivation. Sometimes it's not the boy's fault. Sometimes the reason he hates school is because school doesn't like him. There's a lot of schools that are now unfriendly to boys. And again, I lead workshops for teachers where we look at how do you make a co-ed school friendly to boys without making it unfriendly to girls. I've been to so many schools, including in the Houston area, where boys get into trouble because they draw a picture of a weapon. Boys have always drawn pictures of weapons. It's not a sign of psychopathology. Schools are doing this because they think that by prohibiting boys from drawing weapons, they will decrease the rate of violent crime. They're mistaken. When you tell boys at school they're not allowed to draw pictures of weapons, you don't decrease the rate of violent crime. You just increase the rate of boys who say, school's stupid. I'm going to go home and play Grand Theft Auto where I can kill as many people as I want to. So again, as a clinician, you have to investigate this particular boy's story, this particular girl's story. What's going on here? What's driving this? Is the kid concerned about the parents getting a divorce? Does the kid hate school? Is the kid depressed? You really need a good clinician who can sort this out.
Beautiful answer. Thank you so much. Our next question is made out of 3 different parts. I'm not sure if I should read the 3 of them all together. I'll start with the first one, and if you want me to go ahead and read the second 2 parts, I will. Would speaking the first language only at home, would only speaking the first language at home cause any learning delays or social problems to kids at school?
Well, that was the belief back in 1964, but we now have so much research showing, yeah, of course you want your kid to be fluent in English, but the language of home should be your first language. If your kid can speak it, that's what you want to speak. You want them to be fluent in that language. There's so many benefits to being bilingual, just from a cognitive perspective. But what I was emphasizing earlier this evening is the cultural advantages. The culture of American popular culture is uniquely perverted, and most other world cultures are less so and give a different perspective. So if you are listening to music in another culture, that's a good thing. If you're watching movies in another culture, another language, that's a good thing. You want your kid to understand that American popular culture is not the whole story. There's more to that. Kids who speak other languages at home right now are outperforming American kids who speak only English. So I don't think we need to be too concerned that this kid's school performance will suffer. That's assuming that this kid is fluent in English. If this kid's not fluent in English, then they do need to be brought up to a level of fluency so that they can succeed in school.
So thank you again. The next part of the question, how do we best limit time when kids are on computers now all day for virtual school?
Yeah. Well, this is not the pandemic parenting talk, which is a different talk where we talk about what's happened to kids during the pandemic. But the pandemic has created great stresses in this regard, because all of a sudden, every parent is expected to be a homeschooling parent to some degree, and that doesn't work in many families. If both parents work, they can't just take off time to supervise their kid. But expecting elementary school kids to sit in a room and look at a screen and learn anything doesn't work. And we can now say with confidence, it's not working. And the younger the kid, the less likely it is to work. To expect a 6-year-old to learn in a room, sitting by themselves, by looking at a screen, it's not age appropriate and it's failing. And again, there are, as you implied just now, there are many stories of kids who are not even pretending, and they're playing video games when they're supposed to be looking at their teacher. You need to work with your school and make sure that the device has an app on it that will not allow kids to go to Roblox. Again, when I meet with schools, I always insist that parents be allowed to install parental monitoring software on the school device. Some schools won't. Some schools will say, hey, we don't give parents administrator privileges, so you cannot install parental monitoring software on the kid's device. How do you make sure your 9-year-old isn't playing Roblox on the school computer? The teachers are often overworked, overwhelmed. They can't be monitoring what every kid is doing on their device. So it's a huge problem. And the short answer is you must have parental monitoring software installed on that device to make sure your kid is not on Roblox or Call of Duty when they're supposed to be participating in the school discussion. And if the school won't allow that, then you need to find a different school.
Awesome. The last part of this question, I'm actually going to be combining 3 questions that we got at the same time. So simply, all our kids are on all those, connected to the school all the time. And they do not have the ability to socialize because of the pandemic, which is something you've already touched upon. But how can we possibly limit their social time on their phones if they don't have an option to actually go and meet with their friends otherwise?
All right. I am actually going to pull up my pandemic parenting talk because I've got to use my slides for my pandemic parenting talk. And I'm going to ask that this be the last one because I read my daughter a bedtime story, and it's 8:37 here in Pennsylvania, and it is a school night. So let me go ahead and share those slides. This is from my talk on pandemic parenting. So you've heard me mention Jean Twenge earlier. Certainly our leading scholar on trends in anxiety and depression among children and teens. She did a survey of more than 1,500 middle school and high school students in May, June, and July of this year. And what they found is that only 20% of middle school and high school kids were reporting symptoms of depression, which is actually lower than the percentage from 2 years ago. But when you dig deeper into the data, you see a bifurcation in the results. Some report feeling worse since the pandemic began, and some report feeling better. So let me go down to the answers.
Dr. Sachs, we can't see your slides. If you could stop the share and reshare it, we will be able to see.
Okay, all right. So let's share the screen, and we're looking at pandemic parenting. All right. So can you see the slide that says results of nationwide survey?
We can now. Thank you.
Good. All right. So one of the questions they asked is, are you having dinner with your parents more often? 54% of the kids in the survey said that they are having dinner with their parents more often. Are you closer with your family? Among teens who said that I am closer to my family now than I was before the pandemic, only 15% were depressed. Among those who said I am not closer with my family as a result of the pandemic, 28% were depressed, almost twice as many. When the pandemic really hit us in March and April of this year, New York Times had an article for parents saying the limits on screen time are going out the window. The only way the kids can be with their peers right now is on the screen. So forget the limits on screen time and just let them do whatever they want to with their screens, social media, whatever. And some families have followed that advice from the New York Times, and the kids are spending all their time in their bedroom, social media with their friends, video games with their friends. Those are the kids who are doing badly. And I see this in the office. I can tell you in 2 minutes whether this kid is one of those kids who's become closer to their parents as a result of the pandemic or not. The kid who's become closer is making good eye contact, they're fluent, they're articulate. The kid who would much rather be on his screen doing social media or video games with his friend is sullen, withdrawn, and resentful. He's depressed. Kids' first need is for their parents. Kids need parents more than they need same-age peers, and that is true of 16-year-olds just as it is true for 4-year-olds. You must prioritize the family. Now, I'm not saying a 16-year-old is the same as a 4-year-old. I'm not, don't get me wrong. But the kid's first attachment must be to the parents. And that is true of a 16-year-old no less than it is of a 4-year-old. And the pandemic has caused many parents to be confused. And they're saying, oh, my kid can't hang with their friend, they can't party with their friends, so I guess I should just let them spend as much time as they want on the phone with their friend, or on the social media with their friend, or playing video games with their friend. Not so, not so. Again, Jean Twenge, Institute for Family Studies, survey published 2 months ago, showed that the biggest predictor of whether or not a teen becomes depressed during the pandemic is whether they become closer to their families or not. It's a twofold difference. If you become closer to your family during the pandemic, you are protected. If you are not closer to your family during the pandemic, then you are at much higher risk. Take-home message from this evidence: prioritize the family. Do not let your kid hole up in the bedroom on their screen with their friend. Limit time on the screen as per the guidelines that I have shared, and insist that at supper time, the screens are off and they join the family. So on that note, I'm going to need to sign off because I promised my daughter I would read to her as I do every night that I'm home.
Well, and we really appreciate you, Dr. Sachs. We're going to start the trivia now. It's just the 6 questions we talked about. And then we're going to conclude, inshallah. I want to reach out to all my sisters and brothers and say, your questions are all beautiful. We just had to go in order with those questions that were already put on the form we put on chat. Sister Bueni, Brother Hassan did an amazing job choosing the questions, and Dr. Sachs did an amazing job answering them. May Allah protect everybody, and may Allah help us all. Brother Hassan, please go ahead and start those questions at this time.
We'll do one thing I would add. Dr. Sachs, thank you again from all of us that you spent your time. I know you have to probably leave us now, right? You won't be here for the trivia.
It's up to you, Dr. Sachs.
I'm going to go ahead and sign off if I may.
Well, then please let us all just thank you so much for the amazing workshop. We look forward to meeting with you again. We've already had a number of requests that you would come back and either talk to our children or talk to us about some of the other topics you mentioned. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for everything you've taught us. The whole team that has prepared for this are thanking you, and all our audience are. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity. Good night.
Thanks a lot. Good night. Okay, Hassan, please go ahead.
We want to share the rules or the prize and such, Sister Dahlia?
Yes, inshallah. So the rules, inshallah, is we are going to be showing you the questions. I'm going to read them. The first answer is the winner. If you have answered one question and then you answered the second one, if you're one of those really, really fast, amazing people, please don't answer a second question if you got the first, because if you do, we'll disregard your second answer and go to the next answer. We just want to be fair. You don't want the same copy of the same book twice. So we want to just be fair. We're hoping that 6 different people get 6 books. And at that, we start. Hassan, did I forget anything? Do you want to add anything?
I yield. Thank you.
Thank you. Bueni, do you want to add anything? Answer on chat, please.
So the question will be
we're
on the
ready.
slides. Okay.
1,
First question.
2, 3. Which one of the following characteristics measured in a child at 12 years of age best predicts health and wealth and happiness in that the individual 20 years later at the age of 32? And you guys were way ahead of me. Maybe I shouldn't even be reading the questions, but amazing, amazing. Okay, so our first winner is
Muhammad.
Hassan, go ahead.
It's Muhammad. That's all the name. There's no last name.
Okay, I'm still sliding up. Wow. Okay, so we don't know Muhammad's full name. Where do we answer? Muhammad, yeah, we don't know who's Muhammad. Muhammad, can you please write your full name on the text so that we have your
Muhammad
full name?
Polat. Muhammad Polat.
Okay, awesome.
Also, Brother Muhammad, so anytime you win, I will send you a link to submit your information for the prize. So please fill the information because we'll be sending the book through Amazon. So we'll need your address for it. So please go and fill the information. Thank you.
Lulu, I don't think you answered before Muhammad. Hassan, can you see that Lulu answered before Muhammad? She's saying she thinks she answered before him.
She did answer before. No, there's no. It's Muhammad, probably like 1 millisecond, but yes, Muhammad was first.
Okay, alhamdulillah.
Okay, next one. Okay.
We're ready for
Everybody
the
ready?
second. 1, 2, 3. Go for the second, please. The immigrant paradox refers, among other findings, to the fact that, I won't even read because you guys are already ahead of the game. So Hassan, please tell us who's the winner. Go ahead and scroll up.
Oh, this is interesting because
Okay, I think this is Ozma, right? Ozma, Sister Ozma, please go ahead and put in the text your full name. Is it Ozma? Did I miss anything? Oh, hold on. I think it's Ozma. Yeah.
It is?
It is Ozma. So Ozma, please would like to get your full name. Please put your full name on the text. Somebody's saying, please freeze text till the. I don't know if we phrasing it is fair for everyone, because some people are actually fast readers, right? Hassan, are you still there?
Yes, I am. 1 second. Okay. Well, what we can do is, you're right.
She's saying she answered C before the last question. No, actually, she answered the C after the other brother put his last name. So I went up and I saw his last name, and that means that we had already asked him for what his last name is.
Right, now I have an entry before the next one, so it's okay. All right. Khalas, inshallah ta'ala, we'll do it better next time. Now, everybody don't type anything. And question number 3, Sister Dahlia, go for it.
So you're asking, I'm not, okay. The curve relating stress to outcomes is known as?
Okay, we have a winner. Man, you guys are, mashallah.
Ibrahim Mohsen. No, Ibrahim gave A. Okay, Ali, Kha, how can you possibly put your full name? How could be Khalid, right? Kha, please put your full name.
Yes, so I like that idea. So we have 3 more questions left. So there's a suggestion that we read the question first, and then we open the chat, and then people can type it in. This is Dahlia.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Somebody just texted me saying, one of our team members saying Ibrahim answered first. Did we miss that? Oh, Ibrahim answered, but then he didn't get the right answer, right? Let me go back to check. Hassan, please check with me. I'm still scrolling.
Is this for this question or the next previous
For
one?
this one.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Our team member just said, yeah, it's with, did you get Kha's full name?
No, I didn't, but I will get it 1 second.
Let's get that before we proceed.
Agreed. So I will open the chat and then disable the chat because, again, as I said, we need to be able to, I need to be able to, I mean, we can scroll them up, but we'll see.
And I will not read the whole thing. I'm only going to read the first sentence. So I'm not going to read the options.
Okay. Actually, no, you should.
Well,
okay, whatever works for you.
I think it's best that we just read the first part and let them look at the answers.
Next question, everybody. Bismillah. Let's go for it. Question number 4.
In human psychology, the big five refers to,
And you can type it 3, 2, 1.
awesome. I think that is actually a good idea.
Okay, the answer was B. So many of you got it. MashaAllah. Very good, very good. Let me go up.
I'm doing the same. I'm still scrolling up. I think we had like, I don't know, 100 B's or something. Okay, so it's Amin. Amin is the first one who answered, or maybe Amina. It's got an E at the end. Amin, can you possibly send us your full name in the chat, please?
Well, the chat is locked, so they won't be able to. But I did send them a form. Okay. Next question. We're about to start, and
Okay, did you log the chat?
the chat is locked.
Okay.
Okay, 3, 2, 1.
According to the guidelines of the American Academy of Pediatrics, teenagers under 18, A, B, C, and D.
Okay, opening up 3, 2, 1, now. I think you get like 100 messages in like,
I know.
inshallah. You guys are
MashaAllah.
phenomenal on this end. Okay, good, good. Hopefully, the answer, by the way, it is D. So whoever got D, congratulations, you got it right. And the person
You know,
who
I'll
won,
need you to say the next question because I am not actually finding. Oh, somebody said self-control.
okay, Reem Hussein. I know you're going way up, sister.
Oh, okay. I scrolled way up.
Yeah, that was the first question. Okay.
I was thinking.
Reem Hussein won this one. Good job, Reem. Yeah, congratulations. And now to the last one, everybody. Again,
Go ahead and send her the link, please, before we move on to the next question. This way we
I already did.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, question number 6. Everybody.
That's the last question, guys.
All right, this is a trick one, so you have to read all of them in 3, 2, 1. The question is,
what is not one of the guidelines for video games? And Hassan, if you want to read the rest, go ahead.
Sure, no more than 40 minutes night on school night, no games in which the primary objective is killing other people. If there is time left over, your minutes will be rolled over to the next day. No games with the moral inversion such as Grand Theft Auto. It should be will be over, roll over. Okay, you got the questions, and in 3, 2, 1, go. And whoever got a C, you got it right. Congratulations.
Let's go up. Somebody actually said Q. I'm sure they didn't mean Q.
Well, they meant A then.
Yeah, because it's right above it.
Okay, awesome. Jazakallahu khairan. That's it, Dalia, from my end. And
Jazakallah khairan. Now tell us who's the winner, though. Let's make sure we got that.
Right, I am still scrolling.
I'm doing the same thing.
Meanwhile, just wanted to mention again, Sis Dalia, you can do this one, or I can do the scroll up. It's up to you.
You go ahead and do the scroll up. Oh, what do you want me to do? You just want me to tell them about the follow-up?
Yes, the plan, inshallah.
Okay, so inshallah, we've got a follow-up that we are planning on. We've got book club, and I will have either Bueni. Would you like to talk about the book club, Bueni? Hassan, is Bueni unmuted?
I don't think she's here anymore.
Okay. Then Zuleika, would you like to talk about the book club? Well, we're going to have a book club, inshallah. And this book club, we are planning to read bits and pieces of the books. We are also going to have a support group. I'll have Brother Hassan talk about the support group and the book club if you'd like to.
Okay, the winner is cool, is the link, by the way, whoever sent it. The winner is cool. I'm pretty sure it's just a nickname. So inshallah, whoever that won that, may Allah bless you immensely. For everybody else, again, yes, so not just a support group, but the entire purpose, inshallah ta'ala, is to continue doing these programs. And inshallah ta'ala, it will be part of that will be book clubs where we'll take the book. And even this session, we want to do a follow-up and take the Islamic approach as well and see how it actually supported by the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And I can tell you a lot of what he mentioned all comes back to Islam so many times. For example, self-control. What is salah, right? What is fasting? It's all self-control. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll definitely talk about those. And support group, we're discussing these ideas, but if you were to sign up, we know to get back to you, and we will, inshallah. These aren't in their discussion phase right now, but we will love all the leaders who want to join, inshallah, even organizers. So please go to the link and we'll follow up very soon, inshallah. And we'll try to send the recording out. If not, definitely YouTube, check the YouTube. There is a recording on YouTube. But we will try to see how we can do a better follow-up, inshallah. And that's it from my end.
وإياكم. Actually, I found Bueni in the room and I couldn't unmute her. Would you unmute her in case she wants to say something, please?
Thank you, Dahlia. No, I'm fine. You guys did a great job. Thank you, Brother Hassan. Thank you, Dahlia. Thanks.
Well, thank you to all the team. May Allah bless you all. May Allah bless all our attendees. I'm going to end up with a dua, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. Allahumma have mercy upon us and forgive us and accept our repentance. You're the most forgiving, you're the most merciful. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. Allahumma accept all our efforts to please you and accept everything we've done and forgive us and overlook all our mistakes and all our shortcomings. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين. اللهم اغفر لنا وارحمنا وأعنا. اللهم أعنا وأعن المسلمين. اللهم help us and help all Muslims. اللهم اشفينا واشفي مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين. اللهم cure us and cure our sick and the sick of the Muslims. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبعه بإخلاص إلى يوم الدين. وارض عنا معهم اجمعين. اللهم امين. اللهم امين. اللهم امين. Jazakumullahu khaira. I want to thank every single person who attended. I want to thank all our amazing team. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in your efforts. I want to give special thanks to Bueni and her team, to Brother Hassan and Masjid Champions, and to all our institutions and every single person who has supported us in this effort. May Allah accept. Barakallahu feekum. You can go ahead and leave the room, inshallah. The recording, Hassan, how are we going to send the recording? Because the YouTube is not complete. It doesn't have the questions and answers.
It does, sister. I checked it. But we will try to send the recording as well. We'll do inshallah.
Okay, so inshallah,
for those who are,
list
yes,
of
for those, sorry.
Go ahead.
For those who are asking the question what book they get to choose one of the 4 books of Dr. Leonard Sachs. That was one of the questions people were asking.
Oh, inshallah, mashallah. So barakallahu feekum. And if you have any questions, put it in the chat. Otherwise, you can leave and please keep us all in your dua.